Guaranteed Foods, delivering all natural food to Midwestern families since 1958. Enjoy healthier food, more free time, free delivery, and better value. Go to GuaranteedFoods.com.
All right, a Monday edition of The Zone right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Jason Anderson with you, Dylan Michaels. We hang out with Jack Johnson today for the first couple of hours, and mainly because we will rely on his voice for a couple of hours. We'll rely on everybody else's voice. We'll see. We'll see how long my voice will last. 913-912-4810 is the text line to join us today. We will talk some college basketball. We'll talk some NFL football. We will talk some Major League Baseball today. Get into a lot of different things throughout the show. We will talk with Matt Tate coming up at noon. R1S1 Sports, the Perpetual Sports Network, presented by 23rd Street Brewery. We will also talk with Josh Kaiser, One Royal Wade podcast, coming up about 12:30 or so. We talk to him on Mondays. We'll do that today. And then Mick Schaefer will be our guest coming up at 1 o'clock. And we've got Bracket of Sound. We will be eliminating a number of teams today. We'll get through the woke up the wrong mother bleeper region, or we're just calling it the wrong mother bleeper region. So we'll talk about that. We'll release that one. We'll eliminate those teams. We'll do that throughout the show. We got Learn Funniest Best as well coming up in the 1 o'clock hour. Jack, what's up, man? How are you?
Pretty good, man. Good. It's one of the best times of the year, in my opinion.
You can't have that deep of a voice when mine's not working. All right,
That's what I got. I can try to raise it a few octaves.
Please, see if it can be go outside and scream for like 20 minutes.
I've had that problem before, the raspiness when you got to talk for 4 hours. So
it happens.
I'll do my best to help you out, but doing really good. Glad to be on.
It happens. I should have given up third base coach duties over the weekend for the 9U/8U for us, but playing in a 9U tournament over the weekend. Very windy. Kids have helmets on. You're yelling, "Go back, pick me up!" Look, screaming constantly because the kids can't hear you. There's wind and everything, and they don't typically look over to the third base coach either. Back, go, pop up. So here we are. I probably should have given up third base coach, but damn it, I will play injured if I have to.
You need to retire as the bucket coach and just go sit on there, and then you can talk to him when they come back.
Head coach is the bucket coach.
Yep.
Head coach is the bucket coach. So he's the bucket coach.
The assistant bucket coach guy.
That would be great. That's called the bench coach. I just sit on the bench and check out scores from the games that are going on and try to catch up on those while that's going on and in between games and things like that. But we persevere. Sometimes you got to play injured, Jack. 913-912-4810 is the text line to join us. We'll get into some of the text throughout the show. Certainly, we will talk about the Kansas Jayhawks, the season that was, what happens moving forward now, what does this team look like. We'll look back at the season. We will talk about Bill Self's comments that I believe some are giving it the proper context, and a number are not giving it the proper context, which is not surprising. We will give it the proper context and talk about what it means, but also, to me, the bigger picture of what it means for Bill Self and this Kansas Jayhawk team moving forward. We'll talk about that. Let's start with L'Jarius Sneed, the Chiefs cornerback, the non-Pro Bowl, non-All-Pro cornerback, even though we know he should be, traded to the Tennessee Titans, and the compensation has certainly brought about a lot of conversation. The compensation is a third-rounder in 2025 and an exchange of seventh-rounders for the Chiefs and the Titans. Now, in the report that was out there with the Titans and Chiefs talking, and they had been discussing a third-rounder, the immediate reaction was, yeah, but the Titans don't have a third-rounder. So what are you talking about, dude? They don't have a third-rounder. Well, we know now, third-rounder in 2025 and exchange the seventh-rounders for this year. It is not what I was hoping for. It is not what a lot of people were hoping for. I find it underwhelming, but it's hard to, like, that's my immediate reaction, is finding it underwhelming. And as I go back to the conversations we were having on the air, the conversations, Dylan and Josh and with Craig Stout of KCSN, we were talking about what is a reasonable expectation for trade compensation for L'Jarius Sneed. And we all would have liked to see a second-rounder at least. Some people were talking first-rounder, but that was Jalen Ramsey Prime that got a couple of first-rounders. But discussing it at the time and saying, here's what we hope they do versus this is the historical precedent for L'Jarius Sneed's age, unfortunate lack of accolades. The bona fides aren't there for L'Jarius Sneed like they should be. We know that. And injury history and what other cornerbacks have brought back. And if we go back to like the last 4 years, when we are looking at cornerbacks that have been traded, if you simply look at cornerbacks that were traded that even didn't involve other players, because a lot of these cornerbacks were traded, other players were involved. If you're just simply looking at draft picks, last year there were a couple of players traded. Rasul Douglas is 29 years old. He was traded for a third rounder that year, third rounder coming up in this year's draft, and a fifth rounder this year's draft. So a third and a fifth for Rasul Douglas, 29 years old. That was midseason. That was in the middle of the season. We're trying to go for it. We need help right now. We've lost some guys. We've got injuries, the Bills. We've got to do something right now. We're willing to give up the third and the fifth rounder right now because this can help us go and win it this year. Because we know next year we got plenty of cap issues that are going on, and we got guys we may have to cut and move things around, so we want to put things together this year. Okay, take that with context. Jalen Ramsey's 28 years old, was traded for a third-round pick. 2023 third-round pick, Jalen Ramsey. C.J. Henderson, 23 years old, former first-round pick. It was only the second year in the league. He was traded for a third-rounder and a fifth-rounder. But that's also 1 year in the league, and this guy was just a first-round draft pick. We're willing to give. Chiefs traded a third-rounder for Kadarius Toney because a former first-round draft pick. What can he be? Bradley Roby was 29 years old. He was traded for a third and a future sixth-rounder. Darius Slay was 29 years old, three-time Pro Bowler, all-pro player, was traded for a third-rounder and a fifth-rounder. Pro Bowler, all-pro player. And A.J. Bouye, 29 years old, all-pro, Pro Bowl 2 times, was traded for just a fourth-rounder in 2020. So there's your range of different players that were traded. The context also with L'Jarius Sneed is the franchise tag, the contract that has to be worked out with another team, and those other and no bidding war. If the Lions hadn't traded for Carlton Davis, if the Bucs were like, yeah, we're going for it. We got another year of Carlton Davis, we're not giving him up. If the Lions and the Titans and the Colts were all fighting each other for L'Jarius Sneed, they might have gotten a second rounder. It's sort of a high third-round pick. If you take the third rounder, exchanging sevenths, whatever it is, wherever the Titans end up being. I don't know how good the Titans are going to be this year. They think they're going to be pretty good by going out and getting Calvin Ridley and then trading for L'Jarius Sneed. I'm not sure I believe that. So I think this will end up being somewhere mid-third round for the Chiefs coming up next year. I also don't believe for a second they're going to use that third-round pick next year. I don't think the Chiefs will spend. I don't think the Titans pick in the 2025 NFL Draft will be selected by the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that'll be used this year. It may be used next year, but I think it'll be used this year to move up, to move around. If there's somebody in the first round that may be there that they didn't expect, like a Trent McDuffie, like it was a couple of years ago, and they used the third rounder, moved up and got Trent McDuffie. I think that's something the Chiefs are looking at this year as to how even a third rounder of any kind, whether it's third rounder this year, third rounder next year, you can use that, move up. I don't think they're going to take that. I think they needed the cap space. I think that much is obvious. And this was the market for L'Jarius Sneed. And at some point, you just have to make a decision of, is this the best we can get right now? If we are not going to sign him to a long-term deal, and we don't want to play the 1 year on the franchise tag, we want to trade him. That's been primary goal number one. We've got compensation that we believe is enough and is fair. Add in the $20 million cap space and the added ability to move around the draft board. I understand why the Chiefs did this. I understand why the reaction hasn't been overwhelming for the Chiefs and excitement of losing L'Jarius Sneed. But I also look at the full picture of what it can mean for the Chiefs moving forward. It sucks not having Sneed, but I also think now you have money to give to McDuffie in a couple of years when he's a free agent.
Yeah, I think this move was to show that...
Again with the voice, Jack.
I think it was to show, hey, they made their choice. They made their decision that Trent McDuffie's the guy they wanted long-term more than L'Jarius Sneed. Yeah. And it also goes back to a point that we know of, that your stars are never really as valuable as you think they are. Like, I remember when Tyreek Hill was rumored to be traded. Then it happened, 20 minutes later? And everybody thought, oh, multiple first-round picks. Oh, Jalen Waddle's going to be thrown in this. It just has to be. Look how good Tyreek Hill is. And that's an offensive player. I think defensive players, even if they're tremendous like Snead was, they're not getting a lot of value back. Chris Jones, I thought, if the Chiefs were to decide to trade him, I wasn't thinking top 20 pick in the draft. Because they also knew how much they had to pay him if they were to trade for him. I think the Titans made that move, of course, to try to put themselves in contention in the AFC South. They want to bolster that secondary. They feel good about their defensive line. But again, as you said, does that make them a lot better? Probably not. I still think they have a big problem at quarterback. Yes. I don't think Will Levis is the answer, and I think they either believe or slightly challenge that opinion. But to me, the return is underwhelming because of the season L'Jarius Sneed just put in. Yeah. But you also brought up the age, a little bit of the injury problems, the lack of accolades. I mean, it was 2 years ago, right, when Rashad Fenton was like the highest-rated cornerback on PFF boards, and we're talking about how he's so underrated. And then the next year, not very good, and he's traded for, a 6th or 7th round pick to Atlanta. That's how quickly I believe cornerbacks can fall off. Not saying Snead's going to do that next year. I think Snead's going to be just fine and really good. But at the end of the day, the Chiefs freed up some money. They've got flexibility in the upcoming draft. And let's be honest with Brett Veach, the position he hits on the most is the secondary. He hit on Trent McDuffie. He seemingly hit for depth on Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson. He seemingly hit on Brian Cook. Hell, Chamari Connor's making big plays in the playoffs. Like, that is one area I don't really concern myself with when it comes to Brett Veach drafting because he always seems to find the right guy. Snead was a 4th-round pick. Not that Chamari Connor is going to be the exact same thing, but you could see the similarities of the type of player he was, a little bit of the hybrid, the cornerback and safety. And when you've got a blue chip like Trent McDuffie, you also need to understand you need to pay him. Right? So when you come to this situation a few years down the road, you don't want to trade him for a next year 3rd-round pick and a 7th-round pick this year. I think everybody's always going to think it's underwhelming because of the year L'Jarius Sneed had. He was one of the game's, if not the game's best cornerback. But I just go back to the point of every time you think your star is worth a first, worth a second, they're really not. Because especially in deals like this, when you have to pay them, it's going to be less at the end.
Yeah, it feels like your minor league system in baseball. You love the guys in your minor league system way more than other teams think of your players in your minor league system. They are never as good as other teams view them. They view them a lot lesser than you do. So, hey, we're going to trade this guy. We got to get this, and this for it. Whoa. You just traded Will Myers for James Shields and Wade Davis? Like, that's it? That's what you got for Will Myers, the minor league player of the year, the #1 minor league player in all of baseball? Got Shields and Davis? That's it? And you had to throw an Odorizzi? Like, you got screwed there. It turns out they did not. They did not get screwed on that one. Maybe the Royals actually saw Will Myers for what he was at that time and said, the only way we're going to capitalize and max the value on Will Myers is right now. Because he has not turned into the player. He's been a good major league player. He's not turned into the player that people thought he was going to be as this next up-and-comer, this guy that's going to be number 3 in a lineup, play the outfield, and just be a stud and an all-star year after year after year. He hasn't been that. And the Royals, we know they end up winning a World Series, and Wade Davis was a huge part of that, and he's a cyborg, and not sure that he's human. I guess eventually he became human. Yep. But at a time, he was not human.
Down the road.
Yes, he didn't get the software update later on for the computer chip that's clearly inside of him. But to your point about Rashad Fenton, one of the things that I was thinking of as well is 2 years ago when the Chiefs were heading in, when they traded Tyreek Hill. They traded Tyreek Hill after Charvarius Ward went to the San Francisco 49ers. And it was, who's going to play opposite of L'Jarius Sneed? Now you are saying L'Jarius Sneed then has to play outside. You got Fenton. You got DeAndre Baker, that you're hoping you can get something from. You got these ancillary parts. You're going into the draft. Then you trade Tyreek Hill. And now you're like, Lou, this is going to be a step back, a rebuilding year. You traded Tyreek. You don't have Charvarius Ward. You got a hole at cornerback. You clearly don't have your #1 receiver. And all they did was get McDuffie, Watson, Williams, Najee Johnson. I know he was injured, but they got those different guys in the draft. And Snead stepped up and played at an all-pro level. They are expecting McDuffie to do the same thing. And to your point about developing the cornerbacks, like, I think the Chiefs, McDuffie may be the exception. He was already the exception in spending a first-round draft pick on him. He may be the exception in spending that money because they didn't want to pay Ward. They didn't want to pay L'Jarius Sneed, and some of that being age and injury history. I think McDuffie might be the exception. The Chiefs look at corners that fit their system that they can find and develop. Not necessarily this corner, we're going to take him in the top 10. He's a can't-miss guy, and he's going to be a stud for years and years and years and put him in any system. The Chiefs look for traits. They draft for traits. L'Jarius Sneed had the traits. That's why they drafted him. They developed him. A lot of credit goes to L'Jarius Sneed for him developing and becoming the player that he is. But they did the same thing with Charvarius Ward. They're trying to do the same thing with Josh Williams and Jalen Watson and Najee Johnson. And Trent McDuffie, now in 2 years when Trent McDuffie is finishing up his 4th year in the NFL and looking at that 5th-year option, and do you sign him long-term? He'll be 2 years younger than L'Jarius Sneed is right now after Sneed's 4th year. Sneed was an older player when they drafted him, which may have been why he went in the 4th round, or just simply the safety and cornerback and, not having that solidified position in college. But we went through this with Charvarius Ward 2 years ago. And Brett Veach and the Chiefs figured it out. And I think there's a level of deferring to Brett Veach and understanding that he probably has a decent idea of roster construction and building a roster around a Patrick Mahomes and a Chris Jones and paying that much money. The man's got 3 Super Bowl championships. And with the 3 Super Bowl championships, it is odd the level of he doesn't know what he's doing criticism that comes with that when it's Andy Reid and it's Patrick Mahomes and that's it. Well, it's a lot more than that because we're talking about how awesome Trent McDuffie is. And we're talking about the guys they have developed and L'Jarius Sneed drafting him and the offensive line and how much money they're going to have to pay for Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. Coming up as free agents. Those are draft picks. Those are guys they drafted and developed. Rashee Rice was a draft pick. Well, yeah, but Breeland Speaks and Sky Moore and, guys like that. Yeah, you can always focus on the negatives that are there. Brian Cook, who stepped in and filled in for the role for Juan Thornhill. They didn't have to pay Juan Thornhill because Brian Cook was ready to go. Finding Mike Edwards means you didn't have to go out. Drafting Brian Cook and finding Mike Edwards for cheap means you didn't have to go out and pay for 2 Justin Reeds that are there as a safety. So replenishing that. They have money if they want to extend a Creed Humphrey or Trey Smith. They have money if they want to extend a Nick Bolton. That may make people's skin crawl because of the linebacker spot. They have money to extend different players, bringing back a Mike Dana if the market falls back to the Chiefs of what they want to pay him, and give yourself a better chance to three-peat as opposed to it's thrown into the lap of L'Jarius Sneed, who is fantastic. Nobody is debating that. Nobody's doubting how good he is. But it's L'Jarius Sneed, or it's the $20 million in cap space and the 3rd-round pick that allows you to maneuver the draft board. All of that is a part of it.
It's a huge part of it. And the Chiefs, going into this offseason, really did have that decision to make of who is more vital to this defense. Was it Chris Jones? Was it L'Jarius Sneed? I think with the fan base, there was a large chunk that said Sneed because, Chris Jones didn't sign a deal last year. He was willing to sit in the suite for that first game. So that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. But I always looked at that and said, when he gets back out in the field, we're going to see the type of player that he is. And I always go back to with these 2 players, right? If you replaced Chris Jones, there's really no other Chris Jones. The only other Chris Jones in this league retired, and you were never going to get him in Aaron Donald. With L'Jarius Sneed, not saying he's easily, able to be duplicated, but you do have that next guy in line. You've got a Trent McDuffie. And what do good teams do? They draft a lot of great players. And the hard part about it is that when those players come up to their contracts, you're going to have to let some good players walk. Like, if the Chiefs weren't going for a three-peat, they probably wouldn't be worried about all these great players that are wanting big-time deals, or they would have committed so much money to a handful of those guys because they were worried for what their team looked like after that player left.
Yeah.
We have seen time and time again with Brett Veach, a decision like this comes straight to the front door, and he shuts the door on him, right? Tyrann Mathieu wanted the long-term extension. He was considered the heart and soul of this defense, and they said, we're not paying you that. We're going to go get Justin Reid. In fact, they signed Justin Reid before Tyrann Mathieu would sign. They make the cutthroat decisions, but that's what the really good teams do. It's what New England did for a number of years. Think about how many great players just played through their contract and they said, okay, thanks for what you did, but we're moving on to the next youngest guy, the cheapest guy. And that's how they were able to replicate that success over and over and over again. And let's be honest, L'Jarius Sneed could go be an all-pro in Tennessee. He very well could. Charvarius Ward went to San Francisco and was electric in that secondary. But the Chiefs can live with that because that hole is never as big as we think it is, right? I think with Chris Jones, it would have been. If Chris Jones was traded and they got a couple of picks, they could have replenished. But still, I think that hole for the defense would have been much harder to replace than it is going to be with L'Jarius Sneed because you've already got that second guy in line. How Sneed was kind of the second guy in line for Ward, I think McDuffie's the second guy in line to replace Sneed.
No, I'm with you on that one. We'll take a timeout. We'll come back. I want to talk about a scenario that I don't know that many people were giving much credence to or feeling like there was much weight to a possibility for the Chiefs and L'Jarius Sneed. What could have happened in a couple of months. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the potential of the comp pick that's being talked about and what do the Chiefs now do moving forward. We'll get into that. We'll also talk certainly about the Kansas Jayhawks, the NCAA tournament, the chalk that we're seeing in this tournament. Great year to do all these different upsets in the first couple of rounds. Nice job, Jason. This was the year to go chalk if you did. Congratulations. We'll take a timeout. We'll come back, continue rolling more zone right after this. Joe. Dylan Michaels here for all four today. Good for you, Dylan. Well done. Nice job. 4. Hold on, number 4. You got all 4 today. This is the first quarter still. All right, so you can't get worn out yet. First quarter. I still got 3.5 quarters of the voice. I think I'm good. I think I'll be able to make it for 4 quarters. It's like the tournament. I just need longer commercial breaks, Dylan. Okay, can I get that 3-minute timeout, 4-minute timeout? And I hope I'm not like Bill Self, as one of his players told him, I actually need more rest. I'm not able to go back in yet, which is interesting. We'll hear from Bill Self. We'll talk some Kansas basketball and the NCAA tournament coming up in the 11 o'clock hour. There is a scenario that I don't think people were, I don't think people were giving a lot of attention to, or at least thinking there was much weight to it. And I think that is the Chiefs taking the franchise tag off of L'Jarius Sneed. I don't think it's something anybody wanted to acknowledge, that if the Chiefs got to a point to where they didn't get the right compensation and they didn't want to go long-term with L'Jarius Sneed, and they clearly don't want to play this year on the franchise tag. They did it last year with Chris Jones, where they thought they were going to get something done. It never happened, and it hamstrung them in what they could go out and do in free agency. And luckily, they did not commit to multiple years to somebody because they won a Super Bowl. And it allows them to go out and assess, and they got Hollywood Brown, and now they can go into the draft. I think the cap space was so vital to the Chiefs that if they did not get something back, no team was willing to trade for him. They couldn't come to some sort of an agreement and compensation with L'Jarius Sneed and his representatives. I think there's a real scenario where the Chiefs just simply take the franchise tag off Sneed and allow him to leave as a free agent. And then maybe you get a third-round pick for him in a comp pick next year, where right around what you would have gotten for L'Jarius Sneed anyway. But also, you don't have to worry about the formula by trading him. You don't have to worry about the formula of Hollywood Brown, or if they go out and sign somebody with the $20 million and that money that starts to add up, and do you get a third or will it be a fourth or whatever. I think there's a real scenario that the Chiefs would have just simply taken the tag off L'Jarius Sneed and said, we got to keep the lights on. And this is just, it's a tough decision, but it's one that we have to make.
I think it was huge for the Chiefs that Chris Jones came back in and played the way that he did last year. Because if he didn't, I think we would have seen something like this and almost publicized it, really. Because what the Chiefs probably won't tell you, because they don't need to, they won the Super Bowl, was how bad that affected their offseason last year. The entire focus was getting this deal done with Chris Jones, and they just never came to an agreement. And it turned, I wouldn't say toxic, but kind of toxic, where he's willing to sit out game one and because you're not going to pay him. And then he said, you know what, fine, I'll play on this franchise tag. But as you just said, that hurt them going after a wide receiver. Now, there wasn't any wide receiver that I think they truly didn't go after that would have made a huge impact on this team.
I wonder if Hopkins would be on this team instead of the Titans. That's the one name that comes up.
Yes, and maybe it was Brett Veach and this front office putting too much stock into Sky Moore, into Kadarius Toney, saying, hey, these are young, controllable guys, and we've seen Patrick Mahomes just make about any wide receiver look good. But we saw this year, there's no denying it, there was severe struggles with that group because there was so much unknown with Chris Jones' contract in the offseason. This year, we have seen such a different approach. It's been, we're going to get everything done seemingly before the draft, right? We're going to get the Jones deal figured out. We're going to get the Sneed situation figured out. We're going to fill the wide receiver role. And then you go into the draft and you say, it's not as pressure-filled anymore. I mean, this might be the least pressure-filled draft that Veach has had, in my opinion. Some people could have differing opinions with that, but you can go a couple different ways now in the first round. Whereas last year, remember, it was so hell-bent on getting a wide receiver, then they went with Felix Anudike-Uzomah because the edge rushing spot was another issue with that team. So I think Veach has taken this as, I'm not going to leave this up to chance anymore. I'm not going to leave this up in the air of, oh, do we have the money to sign Sneed? Will he be there in week one? Will he be there in training camp? Let's get this figured out. Let's get our draft compensation. Let's get our draft picks so we can be flexible. And also, let's free up some money so we can continue to add more depth to this team.
There is some news out of the competition committee. And, there were a number of rule change proposals that have been out there. And we have talked about the kickoff rule a lot. We've discussed that and what the kickoff rule will look like. There is a rule that is being implemented that the NFL has now agreed to, and it is by unanimous voting, that they have now eliminated the hip drop tackle. So that is out of the game now. As it writes here, it is a foul if a player uses the following technique to bring a runner to the ground. He grabs the runner with both hands or wraps the runner with both arms and unweights himself. By swiveling and dropping his hips and or lower body, landing on and trapping the runner's leg at or below the knee. Penalty for a hip drop tackle, loss of 15 yards, and an automatic first down. It is a play that does result in injuries, but it's going to be a disaster officiated. I think it's going to be a disaster the first couple of months of trying to officiate this, that almost any play from behind will be viewed as a 15-yard penalty.
It's going to be the worst officiated first 5 weeks of the season. Worse than when pass interference could be reviewed.
Oh, yeah.
Worse than when putting your weight on the quarterback for roughing the passer was. This is going to be bad.
Yeah. I think it'll remind people of what was the NCAA freedom of movement rule change that they put in a few years ago. And actually, it was like 5 or 6 years ago. And it was the first couple of months, November and early December it was free throw contest because teams had to adjust. It went from wrestling matches. It went from the Big East football game on a basketball court to you now have to allow the player to run through screens. And if they're, running down the baseline and, switching sides and cutting, you can't just grab them and pull them. Like, they have to have freedom of movement. You can't have two hands on the player, on the ball handler. And so if you do, that's going to be a foul. So we saw a lot of free throws early on, and teams were expected to adjust. Now, eventually what happened was you got into the NCAA tournament, and they got a little more lax, which is what happens every year. The NCAA tournament almost every year becomes more of a physical basketball game. We see that a lot. We see it this year. It's a more physical basketball game this year in the tournament than we have seen officiated. I think the first month or so many what would be viewed as, I don't think that rises to the level or fits the criteria of hip drop, is going to be called that because the NFL is trying to shock the system of the defenders to just get it out of it. Just get it out of the game as much as possible. But I don't know how. In fact, I highly doubt that today's officials will be able to officiate that in a way that is correct of this person actually did a hip drop tackle, grabbed around the waist, picked up his weight, swiveled in a jerking, pulling manner, and then landed on the lower body. All of those things have to be met. Those are and, not ors, in the rule. And this, and that, and that. I think there will be a number of times where one of those is met, and it's just flagged 15 yards.
Well, you think about the way the NFL has changed its rules. I mean, only the offensive players have really been benefited from this. If you're a defensive player, think about the ways you can't tackle somebody now. I'm not saying that a hip drop tackle is this clean play, because there are some times it's seriously injured a player and it can look pretty dirty. But also, if I'm a linebacker in the NFL and I'm going over in my head, in the moment, which is pretty hard to do in general. If I'm going at high speed and I see a grown man running toward me and I have to tackle him, I have to think, I can't lead with the crown of the helmet. I can't go high. Now I'm a little bit timid to go low when you think about it, because if I'm grabbing, let's say, Derrick Henry by the legs, which is the only way you can tackle him pretty much, and I can't grab him around the waist and drop my weight, right?
Right. I've got to just have my legs dragging on the ground while he's running with me.
Yes.
I will look like one of those, like the umbrella behind the Derrick Henry working out, and he's running, and he's got the thing strapped to his waist, and he's running and pulling the sled behind him. I will be that sled holding onto his waist, and he's just running down the field.
I almost think, too, that that type of tackle is not ever really intentional. I think when you have two people meeting at one spot and then the momentum is stopped, it's probably because you are trying to bring them down to the ground, and you have to use your weight. So if I am trying to tackle somebody, all those things are running into my mind. And to this point of the first 5 weeks of the season, that's not really going to be in the mind of a player who's been able to do that their entire career. I don't stand for, dirty tackles of somebody that is intentionally trying to hurt somebody. But I think for a large portion of defenders in the NFL, it isn't to hurt somebody. It is to do your job, to have your goal of tackling somebody, bringing them down to the turf so they don't get much further. I can see it now. There's going to be one game in the first 5 weeks. It'll be the fourth quarter. One team's trying to burn out the clock, and somebody's going to tackle a player, wide receiver, running back, quarterback, about a yard before the first down marker, and they're going to call a flag for the hip drop tackle, and that's going to end the game. And then we're going to have a huge conversation piece for about the next week or so before the next game happens.
We've seen it already in practice a little bit that people may not be familiar with or aware of, but the National Rugby League last year banned the hip drop tackle. So when people are looking at it and going, oh my goodness, and now we can't do anything, put flags on them. Those are pretty tough players. Rugby players are pretty tough. But they banned the hip drop tackle. And it was rough. And the big controversy was so many of the tackles that were called penalties and fouls were not hip drop tackles. That was the biggest complaint early on. They implemented it. We're getting rid of the hip drop tackle. And that was just a regular tackle. Well, he didn't actually do the hip drop on that one, but it was so stark. And again, I think it's to shock the system of the defenders. If it's close, we're calling it. If it's close, like this year, the shock to the college basketball system was the charbage is now taken out of the game. If it's close or 50-50, it's a block. It's now a block. You get close to it, it's block. It has to be so clearly an offensive foul, unless it's DeJuan Harris. So clearly an offensive foul that it is going to be called an offensive foul. If it's not that clear, it's a block. And so many blocking fouls this year would have been just called charges just because the officials love to do the charge call. And I think that's what happened in the NRL, and I think that's what's going to happen in the NFL. And I think early on people are going to be annoyed by it, upset about it, and eventually they'll get used to it, like as you mentioned, putting weight on the quarterback when you land on him, which I'm all for not being allowed to touch the quarterback as long as Mahomes plays. When Mahomes retires and if the Chiefs don't have a good quarterback, then do whatever you want to the quarterback. But right now, don't touch him, okay? You cannot touch. It should be a 15-yard penalty for breathing on Patrick Mahomes. Or like when Chris Jones hit the shoulder pad of Tom Brady and it was a roughing the passer, that actually should be a penalty. When Chris Jones talked meanly to Matt Ryan, and that was a 15-yard penalty, that's what it should be for quarterbacks in today's day and age until roughly 2037. At that point, we do need to make it a more physical game.
Yeah, you got to go back to the 90s, yes, probably, and the way that you can get,
my unbiased view of what I think it should be.
Yeah, nobody's going to take our word seriously with protecting the quarterback, right?
Yeah, but I think you're right about the landing your weight on the quarterback. And it was NFL players had to get used to it. There were terrible calls. Chris Jones had a turnover and a sack, strip fumble on Carr. It was called a penalty, and we know how bad of a call that was. And it helped the Chiefs turn that game around because the crowd was incensed. And you also got, was it Sheffers sounding like me?
Voice crack.
There is no foul on the – it's easier for me to do that now.
Yeah,
there is no foul on the play. It's going to be a
Please
first
don't
down.
Hurt me.
Are we okay now? Are we cool? Everything okay? All right, first down. That second half, that was great. But this, you are putting the interpretation of this into officials that have trouble interpreting just what is a hold, and that's a tale as old as time for NFL officials and holding.
I'm worried for the defenders in the first 5 weeks of the season because I don't know what strategy you use. Just throw your body at somebody's legs. Don't even try to wrap around them.
Here's the thing though. If you do everything that we see hip drop tackles but don't land on their legs, it is not a hip drop tackle.
Yep.
So you are almost to the mercy of how the ball carrier falls. Or if somebody else comes in and makes a hit and then his legs go down and you land on the legs, like Arden Key against Patrick Mahomes would have been a hip drop tackle. And plenty of people with the Jags said, the reason he fell is because he landed on somebody's foot and he immediately took his weight off his own leg and then he went down to the ground. It wasn't that he was trying to hurt Patrick Mahomes. It wasn't a, quote, hip drop tackle. But by grabbing Mahomes and then going down and then landing on his leg, that would have been 15 yards for the Chiefs. Mahomes still would have been injured. And that's what they're trying to avoid. We'll take a timeout, come back, wrap up this hour next. All right, wrapping up this hour, we'll talk some college basketball in the next hour. We'll talk about what's going on in the NCAA tournament, KU moving forward, etc. Text comes in 913-912-4810, says that is 100% happening in a Chiefs game, and the internet will break. Absolutely. The second a hip drop tackle is called against the Chiefs opponent, well, there it is. Of course it was going to be in a Chiefs game. By the way, cool. Don't touch the Chiefs players. Chiefs on defense, what do you expect them to do? Chiefs on offense, these cheaters out here, right? Yep. It's like every other college in the NCAA. It's like, we got to get rid of the NCAA because they're coming down too hard on us. And we're doing it for the sake of the kids. Those guys are cheating. Those guys are cheating and doing it. They are trying to exploit those kids. We're doing it because we care about them. It's ridiculous.
The Zone is presented by Guaranteed Foods, delivering all natural food to Midwestern families since 1958. Enjoy healthier food, more free time, free delivery, and better value. Go to GuaranteedFoods.com.
All right, we continue right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Jason Anderson with you. Jack Johnson hanging out with us until noon. We've got Dylan Michaels on the ones and twos. We will talk with Matt Tate coming up at noon, R1S1 Sports and the Perpetual Sports Network, and then Josh Kaiser will join us, One Royal Way podcast coming up about 12:30 or so. Mick Schaefer, 1 o'clock. We've got a bracket of sound. We will be eliminating a number of teams today. We got teams to eliminate over the next few days in the bracket of sound, so we will do some of that today coming up in the 1 o'clock hour along with Learn, Funniest, and Best. The Kansas Jayhawks season is over. Ends in the second round for the fourth time in the last 5 tournaments. I'm not sure what happened in the other tournament. By the way, I think every program in America would take every 5 years, you win a national championship, but the other 4, I apologize, you're going to lose in the round of 32. Just so you know, you do have to take that as part of it. So will you take the deal? No, I'm going to take my chances on the other 4 years. I think I can get 2 championships out of it, maybe a couple Final Fours. Let me say, as a Missouri fan, I would. I don't even need the championship. Just win 4 games in one tournament, and I'll take the second round loss in the other ones. That's perfectly fine because, 4 out of 5, they typically don't even make the tournament. So remember that one year they made the tournament and they won a game. That was cool. They did lose in the second round, though, so that happens. But 4 out of 5 years, they have lost in the second round. And surprisingly, and I do wonder as we move forward if there's something to take away from the USC game and this one, because it's the 2 largest defeats in KU history in the NCAA tournament have come in the last 4 tournaments, in 21 and then this year in 24 in the second round. We'll talk about the difference between those teams. The main conversation has been Bill Self's comments after the game. Let's play the shorter one, clip number 1. This is the quote on Twitter. This is what's making the rounds on Twitter when it first happened, before there was video and the entirety of the Bill Self comments. But here's the shorter clip of Bill Self that is the headline-grabbing comment from Bill Self.
Well, I think for the last month, I've been thinking about next season, to be honest.
There you go. Bill Self has quit on his team, obviously. He's done a disservice to KU. And the head coach that for a month has been thinking about next season while these players are going out and playing their hearts out for him, that's unfortunate. I'm not sure how you can move forward. If I was KU, I'd probably go out and hire John Calipari because he may be available. He won't be available. That's the out-of-context part for Bill Self. There's a lot more context to it that we will get into. This is a longer clip. I wanted to have both the first question and the follow-up with Vahe, because I think the first question leads into the second, the answer for Bill Self in the thinking about next season. The follow-up from Vahe comes from the answer from Bill Self in the first question. This is about 3.5 minutes, okay? I left the Vahe original question in there, so this is Vahe question, Bill Self answer, Vahe question, Bill Self answer. You can figure out for yourself what Bill Self was talking about. Here is that exchange Saturday late afternoon.
As it was getting late in that game, did you find any of your thoughts turn into, for lack of a better term, the episodes and how it sort of got to this, or have you thought about that?
Oh yeah,
I've
thought about it, but that wasn't a part of the thought process at all, Vahe. I'll probably think about some of the things that didn't go well or didn't go right this year, and some of the things that did. The bottom line is this: our program over time has taken great pride in being able to defend and rebound and doing things that are important to any team winning, but it's probably been stuff that we probably excelled in over time as much as just about anybody has. And it's disappointing today that there was absolutely no sign of being able to slow them down. They were great. whenever we made mistakes, which we made many, they made us pay. And then when we didn't make mistakes, they found a way to still grab an offensive rebound or whatever and score a putback or whatever it was. But, Mark's team is so good offensively. And when, if you try to dissect it and say, well, what do you want to try to take away? We didn't do a good job of taking away strengths, but still yet at halftime, I thought that we were in decent shape, except for, my guys were gassed. I mean, everybody knew that at the end of the first half. I mean, my guys were gassed. I hadn't had very many times where you take a guy out and he's sitting through a 3-minute timeout, and I say, go back in. He says, I need a little bit more time. So I knew that we were tired there, and I was just hoping we had enough energy to get to the finish line. And I'm not going to blame it on energy, but I think we played very fatigued the second half.
And just sort of attached to that, I mean, a competitor that you are, I'm sure this will stick with you. But I mean, is it something you already feel like I got to start thinking about next season, or you got to absorb this for a little while?
Well, I think for the last month, I've been thinking about next season. To be honest, not in the moments during the game, but obviously we played. We had 8 guys on scholarship, and we played. I mean, that were healthy there late, and injuries are part of the game, so that's not an excuse. But we could have done a much better job as a staff, putting more guys out there that we could play, and so that's something that I've thought about for a long time. And the thing about it is in basketball, early on, you can play through some things, but the course of a season, there's a grind that goes with it, and bodies get run downs, injuries occur. That's all part of it. And when you don't have as much firepower or as that maybe you've had in past years, it certainly showed this year.
So there's the entirety. That's the clip. That's the quote from Bill Self. Vahe asking him, because Bill Self, when Vahe asked and said, for lack of a better terms, the episodes, Bill Self said, look, everybody has a story, and we've had our episodes throughout the season, as in like the story of a TV show. Here are different episodes throughout the season. He said, we've had our different episodes throughout the season. Every team has a story. And that's when Vahe was saying, as it was getting out of hand in the second half, did you think back to the lack of a better term, the episodes and things like that? And that's when Bill Self was like, no, not at the time. No, we're playing a basketball game. Like, I'm trying to get through. How do we do this? And then talked about, how fatigued they were. Samford, I think Samford played a role in the loss to Gonzaga because of that second half and how Kansas had to play and scramble. And for 40 minutes that Kansas played a team that was going to pressure nonstop, no matter what, off a make, off a miss, off a turnover. It's going to be constant pressure. And then a shorter turnaround, not an excuse, it's reality. But if it was just simply an excuse, then Bill Self wouldn't have pointed out that we as a staff needed to do a much better job of having guys available. That you can go through a season and early on you can overcome some things, but as the course of the season weighs on and the stress of a season weighs on, and then you get into the tournament and some guys go down, if you don't have enough players there to fill out the roster, you can run into something like this. I think Bill Self's point, and Jack, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think Bill Self's point when he said, I've been thinking about this for the last month, to be honest with you, is he's a CEO. He is the general manager of the team. And thinking about it for the last month is, how do we make sure in the future we aren't in this position? What do I do in the portal? Because you're always recruiting, always recruiting. What do I do in the portal? What do I do to add to the recruiting class that we have these, a top, 5, top 10 recruiting class with these 3 players? But he's already said, quote, we have to add to it. What do I do there? For the last month, how do we avoid this situation? And quite frankly, when he said defending and rebounding to the level that is an expectation of KU, I mean, that's Bill Self. Defending, rebounding. It's what they do. And it was weird seeing a KU team defensively that had no answers for Gonzaga. That it wasn't just that Gonzaga was scoring on 17 of 21 offensive possessions. It was that they were getting layups and open threes and open shots, and Kansas was scrambling, and then they get the offensive board and a putback. It was a Kansas team that I hadn't seen in a long time. And I think Bill Self's point is what we did as a staff wasn't good enough this year for even these players to help them out. And for the last month, I've been going through and seeing how I can make sure that doesn't happen again at KU. Not for the last month, I've been checked out and I'm already thinking about the future. For the last month, how do I make sure 2024/2025 does not end up like this? Because in the transfer portal, it's a different beast now. It's a different game because you have to worry about your players transferring. I know Marco Jackson already said he's returning, and McDowell already said he's returning. It's in the moment. It's the same thing as a player going, I'm not going pro, I'm returning. We'll see what happens after that. I hope they do return and develop. But he's a CEO, and in today's college basketball, you probably need to be thinking about that throughout the season in your spare time, just as Brett Veach is doing that, thinking about, the 2025 NFL draft and the 2025 free agency that's going to be happening.
Well, you look at college basketball, college football for that matter now, the offseason and regular season and postseason for that matter, they all overlap. Like today, Iowa State, who's still playing, just got a transfer portal edition. So coaches are still recruiting in every way they can. So I think that was more so about what he was thinking about. I mean, as you saw Kansas play post the UCF game, I saw this tweet on, it would have been that game on Saturday, and it was Kansas was, I think, 13-1, leading by 16 in Orlando. For the rest of the season, they went 10-11. So there were times in that season you go, how do we avoid this again? And I know a lot of the overreactions on Saturday were clean house, get rid of everybody, get rid of Hunter Dickinson, get rid of KJ Adams, get rid of DeJuan Harris. I don't think it's the guys on the floor that are the huge problem. I think the problem all year long was depth. KU could never turn to a guy on the bench and say, can you give us even 5 minutes? Right? What's funny in that context of the press conference there, the answer that Bill Self had, said, it's been a long time since I've turned to a player and said, can you go back in? He said, I need more time. And the reason Bill Self had to, I think that would have been Hunter Dickinson off the top of my head.
I think it's Hunter Dickinson.
Because it was so bad when he was off the floor.
Yeah.
It was, KU was tied, or up 4, excuse me.
Yeah.
You had to
4.
bring in Parker Brown, who it's no fault of his. He's just not the level of Hunter Dickinson. And KU looked up, they were down 9. And it was, can you go back in? He's like, I just got here. I'm playing with I'm coming off a dislocated shoulder. I just need a little bit more time. Where in years past, right, we've seen every KU team about February to March, somebody off the bench gives you that spark. Remy Martin on the championship team gave them that spark.
Yeah.
I even think last year, Ernest Uday gave him a little bit of a spark, like just defensively rebounding. It was, wow, he's got the juice coming in the game. They never really had that. Like you can say Nicholas Timberlake in these last 2 games, and credit to him, I think he had really had a tough year. I think confidence was a big problem, but like Marco Jackson never could take off.
Yeah.
Jamari McDowell consistently could never take off. Parker Brown could never take off. So for fans going, you got to overhaul the roster. I don't think that's the key. I think for Bill Self, using this quote in context was, how can I get this bench at a level where I can take KJ Adams off the floor for 7 minutes if I needed to? Or, in a game like against Samford, the reason that game got close is because the bench couldn't come in there and take over a 21-point lead. You looked up and it was 10, and it was, all right, we got to put the gassed players back in there, and then they're not as good defensively. What's different from this team, and I'm sure we'll get into this, from this loss to the USC loss, well, USC had Evan Mobley, a lottery pick. They were super long. They were athletic. In my opinion, Gonzaga wasn't any of those things. They were not an uber athletic team. They didn't have a tremendous lottery pick. They just were able to take advantage of where KU couldn't, and that was depth. Gonzaga could play a couple different guys off the bench, but when you're getting layup after layup after layup, you don't get tired. When you're missing shots and then you're giving up easy points, mentally you start to wear down more, going, now it's a 10-point deficit. Now it's a 15. Now it's 20. And when it got to the 15-minute mark or the 12-minute mark of that game, I think KU was so mentally exhausted and physically exhausted, where I'm sure Bill Self's going, I want to make sure next year when we're in this game that I can turn to the bench and go, give them some relief. Where this year, for 30-plus games, they simply never could.
And I think part of it is, I definitely think depth is a part of it. Depth has to be a part of it. But I don't know the last time I watched a KU team and I saw 3 guys out there that were defensive liabilities. Like, not just one that you got to overcome, but 3 different guys that you're like, he can't guard. He can't be out there. Well, who else? And that's where the depth comes in. But I think it's depth and roster construction where Bill Self is saying, I think there's a reason he said defending and rebounding. This program has, has been prideful in what we do in defending and rebounding. It's why I use constantly the stat of 70 points. That Bill Self now in his career at Kansas is 54 and 107 when the opposition scores 70 points. They were 4 and 10 this year when they give up 70 points because they simply don't. Right? That's what 161 games when you're playing almost 40 per game, right? I mean, you're talking about 5 years worth of games when he's been there for 21 years. So they don't give up 70 very often. When they do, they're sub 500. I don't know what the rest of the country looks like. I did it before conference tournaments of what teams were like. Kentucky's record, Alabama's record, the teams that score a lot, that are going to give up a lot. What's their record when they're giving up 70? Well, they're scoring 90. So it's a little bit different. Bill Self's defense, Bill Self's team has been that calling card. And I think there's something to even looking at Kentucky. John Calipari's teams have always been defensive calling card. But why now, the last couple of years for John Calipari, the defense hasn't been there? He got young players all the time and then got them to play really good defense. I don't know what the difference is. Why this year Bill Self's team loses 11 games, the most losses at Kansas since Roy Williams' first year, with the probation and everything that was going on. And the last 3 tournaments, 2 of the last 4 tournaments, 5. Because USC was before the national championship, which is what I want to get into. But the 2 largest losses in KU postseason history. And I wonder moving forward now how teams, and this is where Bill Self has to assess it, and all top-level coaches, and maybe why Jay Wright said, no mas, maybe why Roy and Kay said, no mas, I'm out, is how do I stay old, stay talented, and stay connected? Because if I'm staying old, I'm bringing in transfers. If I'm staying talented, I have to bring in top-level transfers. And if I'm staying connected, I've got to get these guys playing as a team every year, restructuring every year. And it's what Calipari's tried to do. We make fun of it because it's like one and done. 2 teams have won in a one-and-done era. Kentucky in 12 and Duke in 15. That's it. They had stud recruiting classes, and some things went their way certainly along the way. And if MKG doesn't have a huge block out of a timeout, Kansas might have won in 2012, right? Anthony Davis is, not human, right? If Anthony Davis wasn't on the floor, the best player on the floor, and he scored like 9 points in the game. That's the impact Anthony Davis made. If it was another top-level freshman, not Anthony Davis, not an alien, then you're talking about one of the best players we've seen in the NBA, won a championship, mainly because of LeBron, but that's besides the point. Won a championship, is phenomenal in the NBA. That's who got Cal his title. And Duke and Coach K and playing a Wisconsin team that beat Kentucky, that I think Kentucky was a brutal matchup for Duke in the championship game, but they didn't have to play him in that particular game. They had to play Wisconsin, which was a great matchup for Duke on that Monday night. But that's part of the NCAA tournament. What happens moving forward? Because getting into the transfer portal, assessing the right players, Nick Timberlake's a better athlete than I think people give him credit for, mainly because he's a white shooter. So it's like, wow, this guy can dunk. This guy can.
That's in bounds.
Yeah, absolutely. This guy jumps off the floor. That's good. But is he a good enough defender overall? No, he's not. He's not. He gets beat too often, and that's not the profile of a KU player. And when you lose your Swiss Army knife in Kevin McCullough that does so much defensively to keep guys connected, you're in a tough spot. And when I look back at that USC game, the difference between that and this in terms of what happens moving forward is the guys that played against Gonzaga double digits. DeJuan Harris could return. Hunter Dickinson could return. Timberlake's out. McCullough's out of eligibility. Parker Brown's out of eligibility. KJ Adams said, I don't know if he's going to return or not. We'll see. I'm not sure. I think he's a pro. I just don't know that he's a pro in the NBA. I think he's a pro. He just might be a pro in Europe. And the NIL changes things. Because when you're back in the day, it's like, this guy's a pro. Yeah, but I'm ready to go make money. And if that's Europe, it's Europe. Sorry. We've seen players do that all the time. Role players that are like, this guy, why is he going pro? Because he's going pro in Europe. He's ready to make money. So I don't know what KJ Adams' future is going to be for that. But that loss to USC, 3 of their 5 starters, Ochai, Christian Brown, David McCormick. You've got the 2 best players on a championship team and the guy who hit the winning shot, essentially, in McCormick. Off the bench, DeJuan Harris played 30 minutes in that USC loss off the bench. Jalen Wilson played 8. Those are your 5 starters the next year that won a national title, and they add Remy Martin. That was the one addition. The team returned. They took that loss. They became more connected, older, talented. Ochai, here's what you have to do to go to the NBA. Okay, great. I'm going to go be the Big 12 Player of the Year. Christian Brown, I can be a first-round draft pick. I'm going to show you I can do that. David McCormick, I'm now growing into a role where I can be this guy and start in the national championship game. DeJuan Harris, you're now the point guard. All right? You're the guy to stir the drink, okay? Remy, come add offense, diversity, dynamism to the offense, and do what you do coming off the bench or starting or just figuring it out. And it didn't work until it did in the tournament. That, to me, is the difference now with this KU team is that, which I think a lot of programs, Jack, are going to be trying to figure out, is we can't just bring everybody back from this tournament or from this loss. And we don't just have an Ochai, a Christian Brown, a David McCormick, and a DeJuan Harris getting ready to fill. A Jalen Wilson that was starting to come on late, and it's like, okay, this guy can now fill in as a starter. That's not there. It's an Elmarko that's underachieved to expectations, but probably achieved to what should be reasonable expectations for a freshman for Bill Self. I would hope DeJuan Harris would return. I love watching him play, so that's why I would like him to return. But I don't know who else is going to be on the team where you can look at it and go, this guy's going to be a senior, this guy's going to be an older junior, this guy's going to be an older junior, this guy's going to be a senior, and you're adding in Remy Martin.
Well, I think that a lot of this roster construction would eventually became the problem. Now, alongside depth, I probably should have added this in the first point, but I mean, 3-point shooting was a liability for this team. And that is kind of this new age of college basketball. If you can't shoot the 3, you can't make that deep run in March. I mean, I think with that championship squad, not only being a good 3-point shooter like Ochai Agbaji, but it's the quick release, right? In college,
so
we see so many slow release guys, and I don't think there was one guy for Kansas that really had a quick release. Maybe Johnny Furphy, but he's 17 years old, right? He's still trying to learn how to play at this level. And I think that, forced Kansas to not get as many good looks, right? It always felt like Kansas could never get good looks. But I think this roster as a whole, there are guys that can work if you add in that shooting.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Everybody's like, oh, I don't want Hunter Dickinson back because he's just this, Dedrick Lawson type of give me 19-11. Well, he was the only guy in the Big 12 to average a double-double. And he can get better if he's not taking on 3 guys in the paint, right? I think a lot of teams, when Kansas would lose by 25, lose by 30, lose by 20, was because they didn't fear them shooting the 3. It was like, fine, keep shooting it over and over again. We know DeJuan Harris isn't going to want to shoot it that much. Kevin McCullough's release was really slow, and then he got hurt. Johnny Furphy had a cold stretch as well. Nicholas Timberlake never really got going. But I think, you can look at that USC loss, and you look at this Gonzaga loss and draw similarities. Like, you would be outside your mind if you would have gone the day after that USC loss and said, yeah, this team, if you bring them back and add one guy, is going to win a national championship. You never really know till the offseason really progresses. I think a lot does have to go right for this team to run it back with seemingly the same group and be better than last year's squad. But I also think, not to play the excuse factor, there was a lot that I think went against them that would have, been, of course, a lot better for this team in March. Like, losing Arterio Morris to a very bad situation, and that was all his doing. I'm not saying they got wrong with that. They recruited him, and that was on them. That then forced Elmarko Jackson, who clearly wasn't ready to be a starter in this group. Then confidence probably became an issue because he wasn't playing that well. Then Nicholas Timberlake lost confidence. McCullough gets hurt. So I think if they stayed healthy and all those things worked out, you're probably feeling much different about this team in a March run. And even if they would have lost in the round of 32, it's like, okay, run back a couple of these guys and you'll feel a lot better. I really don't think they need this complete overhaul of run everybody out of town and go through the portal and go through your recruiting class and have a completely different team. I don't think that's the best result here. I think you need to find about 2 shooters. I think you need to find a true backup big that can give you 10 to 15 minutes a game, take the pressure off Hunter Dickinson, and then you look at this group depth-wise and go, okay, we're probably back to where Kansas should be, but I also think if a lot of those things didn't happen in the regular season, McCullough getting hurt, I think changed the outlook of Bill Self and that coaching staff. It was like, we can try to get through this, but they probably were honest with themselves and said, if we get to March and he's not there, we can't make a deep run because we can't get this bench involved, and our three-point shooting isn't going to be enough. I mean, hell, in the Gonzaga game, Kansas was 7 of 11 in the first half, and they still lost by 20, right? It was because they just couldn't defend.
Yeah.
They didn't have a backup big. They didn't really have a backup point guard. And nobody's going to shed tears for you. You're Kansas. You can recruit. You've got blue blood, power. You can go through the portal. You've got a big NIL situation in Lawrence. But I just think that this is a type of scenario where you don't need to go scorched earth, run everybody out of town. DeJuan Harris is going to be back. I think it's probably 50-50. Hunter Dickinson comes back. I was for sure when he came to Kansas, this was 1 year and he's out. But really, he's not on any draft boards right now. He could come back and say, let me do this again with a better team. KJ Adams, he says maybe he doesn't know. Where is he going to go? He can start at Kansas next year. And then Johnny Furphy, probably lean toward he's going, but if you can replace him with more of an experienced shooter and maybe one that played at a high level. I think Nicholas Timberlake wasn't a bad addition. He also played mid-major, right? If you can go out there and add a power 5 guy that's in the portal, we know everybody's jumping into the portal. You add a shooter, you add a true 6th man off the bench, a big, preferably for Kansas. I mean, you look up here in a couple months and go, all right, I feel much better about this team. But preseason expectations are a lot different than where you get to in the middle of the season. KU, after they got Dickinson, I think everybody here was like, how can they not get to the Final Four? They needed a big, and they got the best big in the portal, maybe the best transfer that's ever entered the transfer portal. But a lot of questions to be answered for Bill Self. But back to the main point of what started this conversation, Bill Self needed to be thinking about next offseason because he needed to start adding depth and defense and rebounding to this team.
The defensive part, I think, is going to go a long way. I do wonder how much you got to add three-point shooting. We know that. But this team and the calling card of being a defensive team, being a team that can go out and just dominate teams, suffocate teams throughout the game, and it's weird. Like, they still ended up top 20 this year. Let me go check to make sure. They still ended up top 20 defensive efficiency, but it didn't feel that way as the season went along. It didn't feel that same, top 20 defensive efficiency when they won the national title. I mean. When they won the national title, they were 17th in defense in KenPom. This year, they finished 17th in defense in KenPom. Now, that's a little different because offenses are up across the board. For example, in 2022, finishing 17th was 91.7 defensive efficiency. 17th this year, they're 95.6. So much higher. That's a big leap from 91 to 95 in defensive efficiency because offenses are up a lot more. Some of that, the Charbage is out of the game. Offenses are more skilled. There are more shooters from lower levels that are coming into upper levels that show that they can, continue doing that. Jack Golke is a guy from a Division II school that comes in and shoots 500 threes in a season and makes 50% of them, and starts, getting was it TurboTax? Get the TurboTax
and
NIL
Buffalo
deal.
Wild Wings as well yesterday.
Wild Wings, TurboTax and Buffalo Wild Wings for this guy that looks like he actually should be doing your taxes. I thought that was, the guy we were talking to when my wife and I were doing our taxes. I thought it was Jack Golke. Why aren't you out there shooting? But defensively is obviously going to be a focus as well. We'll take a timeout. We'll come back. I do want to talk about the NCAA tournament, what we've seen so far, some of the matchups we have, and we might have a matchup of two coaches and teams that people look at and go, well, I'm not putting them in the Final Four because of A, B, and C. And we may have a matchup coming up this week and that somebody's got to go. We'll take a timeout. We'll come back. More Zone next. with us, Dylan Michaels, running the board, running the operation, heading up until 2 o'clock. We will talk with Matt Tate at noon. We will talk with Josh Kaiser coming up at 12:30, and then Mick Schaefer. We'll get some Learn Funniest Best, and we will go through the bracket of sound. We will eliminate some teams that got eliminated in the NCAA tournament. We got a lot of teams and a lot of pieces of audio to eliminate in our bracket of sound. A lot of chalk, and I'm a little upset because I went heavy upsets. I really thought the conference tournament was going to be the prelude to an unbelievable tournament that we're just going to see upset after upset, and obviously we saw a few. I mean, Oakland knocking off Kentucky and Yale beating Auburn. Those are the couple of upsets. But, you know, we talked about a double-digit seed in the Sweet 16. Like, you got to have at least one double-digit seed in the Sweet 16. There have been 40 of the last 44 tournaments, a double-digit seed has made the Sweet 16, 40 of the last 44. Well, this year we had one. Just happened to be 11 seed North Carolina State. That's it. Wasn't 12 seed, James Madison. Wasn't 13 seed or 12 seed McNeese. Wasn't 13 Samford. It wasn't Yale. It wasn't Grand Canyon. Like it wasn't Nevada or Drake or Colorado or some of these teams we looked at that these double-digit seeds can go and pull off these upsets. It didn't end up working like that, and we end up getting all ones and all twos for the first time since 2016, I think it was, that all ones and twos are playing in the Sweet 16. And if you add up the seed numbers of 1, 2, 3, 4, the lowest you can get is 10. So if you had the 1 playing the 4 and the 2 playing the 3, that would be 10. That's a total possible number of 40 with the 4 different regions. This year we have 51. So only 11 seeds lower than what is the max possible, chalkiest tournament possible. And 8 of those 11 is because of NC State. Instead of the 3 seed Kentucky, it's the 11 seed. So one team is sort of in the spot that you would not expect, except for like Clemson over Baylor. That's it. You have a 1, 2, 3, 5 in the South. You have a 1, 2, 3, 5 in the Midwest. You have a 1, 2, 4, 6 in the West, and or the 1, 2, 3, 5 in the East, I should say. 1, 2, 3, 5 in the Midwest. 1, 2, 4, 6 in the West, and 1, 2, 4, 11 in the South with Houston's region. It's been incredibly chalky, which is a real surprise because of how crazy the conference tournaments were. And NC State's on an awesome run that they've now won 7 games, and Kevin Keatts was about to be fired and out of a job, and now he's in the Sweet 16. It's been nuts. It's been crazy from the opposite standpoint. Close wins by higher teams, and then also some blowouts along the way by teams that just look dominant and ready to make a run to a Final Four, Elite 8, national title because of how dominant they've looked.
I think locally here, a lot of people would say, oh, this tournament sucks because KU's already out. K-State and Missouri didn't get in. But this is exactly how I want my NCAA tournaments. Like, you get some of the upsets, right? Yale beating Auburn. I think I had Auburn in the Elite 8 or the Final Four because of the way they could score. But then when it comes down to it, I've always believed what I want in the Final Four are actually the best teams out there. Like, you would be lying to yourself if you didn't want to see Houston and UConn. Or Purdue and UConn, or Purdue and Houston. Yeah. You want to see the best of the best. And I think it's good for basketball right now that you got your fix in with the upsets in some of these crazy games like Colorado and Florida. And then you see Purdue win by 40. And we all talk about how weak Purdue is. Zach Edey gets all the calls. He's shooting 20 free throws a game. Well, now I kind of want to see Purdue get to that point where I can get a really good college basketball matchup. Like, I want the upsets. I want the mayhem of March. But I also don't want what I saw last year. And even though San Diego State and Florida Atlantic gave us a thriller, also San Diego State and Florida Atlantic. And then UConn beats the brakes off San Diego State. Like, I don't want that again.
Yeah.
I don't want to see somebody win by 20-plus every single game. When it gets down to it, I want the best remaining. Now, does that mean Purdue, Houston, UConn, and North Carolina? Probably not. But I do think I want one of those matchups of a Houston and UConn, or a UConn and Purdue. And we probably are trending that way at this direction. We could see a couple more upsets. That's what March is for. But at the end of the day, I want those upsets, but I want them in like the first round. Then I want to see some of those great teams make those runs because Final Fours are better when you've got the best teams out there, maybe not so much the Cinderellas.
Yeah, I'm with you. The early upsets are fun. And then when we get to the Elite 8, the Final Fours, I want to see the bigger schools. I want to see those great teams matching up against each other so we can see those. I mean, I had Houston playing Kentucky, and that's obviously not going to happen. But I'd be perfectly fine if it is Houston taking on Marquette. It may be Duke, NC State. I'd prefer it being Houston and Marquette. I would love those conflicting styles of what would happen on the floor. Like we've got Iowa State and Illinois. You've got the number one Ken Pom offense versus the number one Ken Pom defense in Iowa State and Illinois. Typically, you would side with the offense on that one, which I probably will in watching the way that Illinois has played. Now, they've beaten Morehead State and Duquesne. Iowa State's beaten South Dakota State and Washington State, so they haven't beaten, these a murderer's row to get to the Sweet 16, but they're here. And if we get a North Carolina and a Arizona or even an Alabama, like North Carolina, Bama, to me, the winner, that's still going to be a worthy opponent in the Elite Eight, where I know Clemson has a good team, and they showed it in the non-con that they were a good team and poised that this is the year they can make a run. And PJ Hall is a dynamic player. But Arizona and Bama or Arizona, North Carolina would be a dream matchup this weekend. And we might get a matchup of two teams that people refuse to put in their Final Four based on coaching history. We might be watching this weekend Purdue and Tennessee play each other. Mm-hmm. We may see Creighton, but if it's Purdue and Tennessee, either Matt Painter or Rick Barnes is going to the Final Four. And so for all of I can't put Purdue in my Final Four. No way, not because of Matt Painter. I can't put Tennessee in my Final Four. No way, not because of Rick Barnes. Not going to happen. Cannot do that. We might be watching this weekend one of those teams going to the Final Four. And I've got Tennessee over Purdue, but again, I also had Kentucky in my Final Four, and I also had Baylor in my Final Four. So what do I know? I also had Baylor playing New Mexico, and they did not play New Mexico. They got their butts beat by Clemson in a great game for Clemson, and showing that they're a program that can be more than just a football school. But Purdue and Tennessee would be great for the storylines of somebody's going to lose and go, see, told you they couldn't make the Final Four. Somebody's going to win and go, well, great for them for finally breaking through. Rick Barnes at least has a Final Four. TJ Ford carried him to one, and Dalton Knecht might carry him to one this year. Matt Painter's had chances. And remember, the last team to lose as a 1 seed to a 16 went and won the national championship the very next year. Purdue lost last year to Fairleigh Dickinson. If they go and win a national title, I will gladly exchange losing to a 16 seed as a 1 if you then go and win a national championship. Because Virginia very quickly erased a lot of those jokes by going and winning the national title. They're still there because they're the first one to ever lose to a 16. They also got a national championship the next year. And if Matt Painter and Purdue do that, the Fairleigh Dickinson loss last year, which kind of goes by the wayside a little bit too because of UMBC Virginia already happened. We saw American Pharoah win a Triple Crown in 2015. And then a couple of years later, Justified won one. We had been waiting 30 years, 40 years for a Triple Crown winner, and American Pharoah did it. Then a couple of years later, somebody else did it. And who cares? It's like, we got one. American Pharoah. That was great. We got a 16 to beat a 1. UMBC, awesome. Fairleigh Dickinson. Cool. Good for you. Nice job. Nice job. Oh, Purdue won a national championship the next year.
It's also like with the Florida Gulf Coast and the St. Peter's story. Like St. Peter's went further, but we all remember Florida Gulf Coast a lot more.
So true.
Because they were that 15 seed that actually got to the second weekend and was very entertaining. Like St. Peter's was on the doorstep and then lost at a 9 seed or 8 seed in North Carolina and didn't make it. So that's what's so fresh in our minds. Like obviously nobody's forgot about the Purdue loss to Fairleigh Dickinson. That arguably, in my opinion, because of the matchup they had. You have 7'5" Zach Edey, and Fairleigh Dickinson, I think, tallest player was like 6'9", and they still won. So I remember that one, but I also was so starstruck by UMBC winning by 20.
Yes.
Like I never thought that's how it was going to be. But it's so funny with how we create brackets. And I know Matt Painter has struggled a lot in this tournament, but we also ignored the fact all year long how good Purdue was.
Yes.
And maybe it's great for them and their fans that not only did they beat Utah State, they won by 40. And now going into this next weekend, I think a lot of people are going to be on the Purdue train. But the crazy thing with this tournament is they could go lose immediately now in the Sweet 16.
They could lose to Gonzaga.
You never know. And like Houston blew an 11-point lead with 1:30 to go last night. And I'm sure a lot of people are going, maybe not as good. Texas A&M scored, 90-plus points on them? It was overtime. We're talking about Houston's defense, the one that made so many Big 12 teams look like JV squads out there. Just completely physically overwhelmed them. And now a lot of people are going to go, I don't trust Houston. until Houston goes and dominates somebody else, or UConn. We talked about this before the break. I've never seen a team win a championship and win by, what was it, double digits every single game last year, and then look like they played 2 16 seeds back-to-back to open up. I mean, I think a lot of people are going to still be on their UConn pick, but in the end, we've got so many great storylines, and I think better ones than last year. Of course, here locally, I think we'd all want our teams to be there and be far. I know for K-State fans last year, being in the Elite Eight was awesome and cool, and for a lot of people, Marquise Noel capturing the country was great. But then you go back to the year before that, I think a lot of Kansas fans were like, this is how I want it to be. Kansas, North Carolina, Duke, and Villanova, those are all blue bloods. You're going to have a huge turnout in New Orleans for the Final Four. And this year, we get, the coach that haven't made it that far, Matt Painter, Rick Barnes, Kelvin Sampson, I think going to be a Hall of Famer, going to be one of the game's best coaches. He basically revived Houston's program from where they were 20 years ago and has put them back on the map as one of the more feared teams. Dan Hurley and UConn. They are now firmly, I believe, a blue blood. Some people are going to refute that, but you look since 2000, and they're more of a recent blue blood. But like comparing them to Indiana, I think UConn might have elevated himself because recency bias. You look this good, you win this many championships, you're going to be put on the radar. Now, it's been a couple different coaches, Kevin Ollie and Dan Hurley, but to me, there are so many great storylines going into the second weekend and so many good teams. And I think that's what a lot of people, even though they may not publicly admit it, they want. They want those great matchups. You don't want the 8 and the 9 or the 7 and the 11 playing to go to the Final Four. Maybe some do. If you're a fan of that team, I'm not going to default you for that. But I think for the college basketball fan, the one that wants to see the best possible games, we're trending in that direction going into this weekend.
And some of those storylines are going to be great with coaches, too, because you got TJ Otzelberger, at Iowa State, and building Iowa State into this team that's a 2 seed and so awesome defensively. And can you win that style in the tournament versus Brad Underwood? This is the farthest he's ever taken a team. Ever. Even, Stephen F. Austin was a cool story. They went to the second round a couple of times. But at Illinois, he didn't make the tournament the first couple of times. And then the best he's been is round of 32 loss. And now, and it was my fault because I had, one of their best players on my player pool when they lost as a 1 seed in the second round. My fault, Brad. I apologize. I apologized to him at the Final Four as well. He blamed me, which is totally okay. I had 4 Kentucky players on my player pool this year. It's my fault. I apologize to them. Tennessee, I've got Dalton Connect. You've got no chance. You've got no chance. And shocked that you made it this far, to be quite honest with you. They go like 7 of 25 from 3 and still beat Texas, found a way to win that one.
1 of 20 at some point.
Yeah.
So they got hot late.
It was brutal. I could have been exaggerating with the 7 of 25. Yeah. It might have been 3 of 25 what it ended up being. But, Dalton Connect played better in the second half. But so you can get that matchup. And then, Nate Oates, if he's in the Elite Eight or a chance to go to the Final Four versus Tommy Lloyd, that's, hey, I was right next to Mark Few all those years, and now I've taken my own team. And if Gonzaga were to lose to Purdue and Tommy Lloyd goes to the Final Four at Arizona, you would say, well, what's happened with Arizona and Gonzaga since Tommy Lloyd left the side of Mark Few? Yes, Gonzaga's getting to the second weekend, which they've done 9 years in a row, which ties Duke for the second longest streak of all time. But if they don't get past Purdue and Arizona's playing in Phoenix in a couple of weeks, then how much do you look at then Tommy Lloyd and go, well, how big of a part of that was he with Gonzaga? And you mentioned Kelvin Sampson. And Shaka Smart has been clowned every tournament since going to the Final Four because his entire career is based on that awesome 5-game run where they won 5 games in the 3 weeks, the play-in game, and went to a Final Four. But he's done nothing since then. And if he can get to a Final Four, you quiet those issues. Or you take a coach that was about to be fired in Kevin Keatts, and all of a sudden he's playing in the second or third weekend of the tournament. It's amazing.
Yeah, it feels like more so than ever, you've got a lot of these coaches that need something to prove. Yes. They absolutely need that championship to be hoisting that at the very end of the season. And the reality is, only one of them is going to do it, and that stigma is going to stick with a lot of those guys.
And all those guys that need this or need that, and it may end up just being Dan Hurley again. Just holding it up again and going.
Beating everybody by 20-plus again. That'd be the most impressive 2-year stretch we've ever seen.
Get on my level. All right. We'll take a timeout, come back, wrap up this hour next. All right, wrapping things up here in hour number 2, we will talk with Matt Tate. We'll talk with Josh Kaiser coming up in the noon hour. Talk some KU basketball, some NCAA tournaments, some college basketball, and, of course, talk some Major League Baseball with the Royals, where Nick Pratto didn't make the squad. That was unfortunate. I loved Alec Marsh getting the 5th starter spot, and I hated Nick Pratto, not making the squad because I would have loved to see Pratto be a part of it.
Well, I think the Royals just winning this and said, I'm going to put more stock in the regular season than I do spring training. I always go back to this stat over and over again with people that ask me about spring training numbers. Chris Owings hit 460 with the Royals in spring training in a big sample size back in 2019, and then had one of the worst stretches I've ever seen from a professional hitter in baseball. Like, they looked at Nick Pratto, said, we love what you did. Looks like you made some adjustments. We got to see it in Omaha. Whereas Nelson Velasquez hit 14 bombs and 150 plate appearances last year. Didn't do well in the spring, but it was like, we're not going to put that much into spring training, and I guess that is kind of hypocritical because they put that into spring training with Alec Marsh and Jordan Lyles. But again, Jordan Lyles had a 6+ ERA last year,
right.
and Alec Marsh wasn't great, but better than Jordan Lyles.
Exactly. So you had 2 guys in the regular season where one was better than the other.
Yes.
The only deciding factor that would have been Jordan Lyles was the $8.5 million.
Yep.
And I love the message that sends. We talked about the message of Cole Reagans, getting the opening day spot over Michael Wacha. And to me, the message that it sends of Alec Marsh over Jordan Lyles of just because you're making money, we're not waiting around for you to figure it out. Alec Marsh has earned it. He's getting that spot because we're trying to win. And, to your point about Nick Pratto, if you continue to do this and Velasquez struggles, we don't have to wait that long. All right? If you keep doing this, because we're not going to wait around. We're not going to be in middle to late May and Velasquez going 1 of 30 and going, well, I don't know, what do we do now? Well, no, or April, I should say, not even May, but middle April. What do we do now? Let's go get Nick Pratto.
Yep. Spots aren't handed out anymore.
Yep. Jack, appreciate it, man. Thank you for hanging out with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
All right, we'll take a timeout. We'll come back, continue rolling. We'll talk with Matt Tate coming up next.
GuaranteedFoods.com.
All right, we continue right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Jason Anderson with you. Dylan Michaels. We had up until 2 o'clock the next 4 hours. 2 hours, we got you, by the way. We're halfway there. Not 4 hours. 2 more hours to go. We'll talk with Matt Tate here in a second. We'll talk with Josh Kaiser later on this hour. And Mick Schaefer will join us in the 1 o'clock hour. You've heard all of the NCAA tournament games on ESPN Kansas City and Sports Radio 810 WHB, presented by Xfinity, Greenlight Dispensary, Hollywood Casino, and Trailside RV. Right now, let's talk to Matt Tate, R1S1 Sports, the Perpetual Sports Network, presented by 23rd Street Brewery, joining us here in the zone on this Monday. Matt, what's up, man? How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, man. How about you?
Oh, I am doing just fine, man. I'm doing just fine, and I appreciate, as always, you joining us. Let's talk about your reaction to the game over the weekend and the loss to Gonzaga, and really just those couple of games of getting past Samford, but then falling short, and really Gonzaga running away with it those last 10, 12 minutes.
Yeah, I'll say this: the thing that stands out as I look back is completely, to be honest with you, the first half against Gonzaga. I was really surprised that Kansas was in that game as well as they were. And, you know, obviously the second half things fell apart completely, and I don't know that I saw that coming either. But I just, you know, for this team, it just didn't seem like it was in the cards to me to get out of the first weekend. I mean, you know, whether that was in the first round losing to a tough Samford team, which they almost did, or, you know, just matching up with Gonzaga and how they're going to get by that. It just, you know, it wasn't really even as much the matchups as it was just what was going on with this team and how this year had gone. So for them to find a way to win that first game and to look really, really good doing it, and then to give it all away and then to find a way to finish it. I mean, you know, there's some things I like about that game and some memorable moments and some toughness things that can help you and you know, can really build your confidence a little bit too. But then, you know, to see it fall down like it did in the second round, in that second half, I wasn't shocked about the outcome because, like I said, I think, you know, in every bracket I filled out, I had them losing either the first or the second game. It just didn't seem like a run was there for this team, given its limitations and the circumstances and all the things surrounding it. But you know, they were right there, and they should have felt pretty good. And then to see it fall off in the second half to the point where as soon as they got down double digits, you saw them, you know, heads drop. And it was like they had nothing left, mentally, emotionally, physically. And you don't see that very often from Kansas teams. You don't see that very often from Bill Self teams. And I think that's probably the lasting image that I'll have of this tournament for Kansas and maybe even of this team was just the fact that even they knew what we just talked about, that it probably wasn't in the cards. And as soon as they got down 10, instead of, you know, regrouping and digging and fighting and finding a way, and I'm not saying they didn't try. You know, they tried. They care. But it was just like, oh, gosh, here it is. Even they knew this is the end. And that's weird to see with the Kansas team. And I think that's a big part of the reason that, you know, Bill Self's going to get so active so quickly here in building for next year. I don't think it exactly reminded me of that USC loss in 21 in Indianapolis because I thought, you know, to be honest, I thought that the loss to USC was a much bigger beatdown. I mean, this one, the score doesn't look great, but, you know, again, they were in it at halftime and they were running toe-to-toe with a very good Gonzaga team, especially offensively. But, you know, it's the same reaction. It's the same result. Like, we weren't good enough. I don't like that. Now I got to get to work and roll my sleeves up. There's no week in Bora Bora coming up for Bill Self right now. I mean, he's already working on transfer portal ideas and roster construction and what do we do to make sure this doesn't happen next year.
Yeah, the USC comparison I think is interesting, and even going back and looking at the Gonzaga game with this role and this the players on this team and what they were expected to do and filling in different spots. When Kevin McCullough went down, we knew obviously there's a Swiss Army knife. There's a guy that does so many things for your team and especially defensively. They were hitting shots in the first half that, oftentimes they haven't hit this year, and then the shots didn't fall in the second half. Sometimes you have games where it's your night. Sometimes you have games where it feels like your night, and then things change, and you talked about it. It kind of felt like a let going of the rope a little bit. Not a quitting, but we just don't have enough. We don't have enough to get back in this game. Gonzaga was executing at a high level. And what's interesting to me is, Matt, I don't know the last time we saw a KU team on the floor that just had no answers defensively. Not like, well, we can't figure out how to score against this team, or our shots aren't falling against this team. Like, there were liabilities all over the floor. Like, Gonzaga was executing, and they were scoring 17 out of 21 possessions, but there were layups, and there were open shots, and then there were easy offensive boards and putbacks, and it just looked like KU was lost. And maybe that's part of the when you let go of the rope a little bit between the ears, one step here or there results in looks like an easy layup as opposed to, a step quicker, and now it's a contested layup. Some of that stuff happening. But I don't know the last time I saw a KU, and maybe it was that USC game. Last time I saw a KU team where I'm like, defensively, they just don't have any answers, and Bill Self is over there on the sideline, and it's like, what am I going to do? I can't just go over here and grab somebody and form him into a player that can go out there and play a certain way. This is what we have. These are the weapons we're using, and this battle is pretty much over.
Yeah, I think that's pretty right on, and that's what I wouldn't have recommended anyone to bet their mortgage on Gonzaga in round 2, but I might have done half of your mortgage, because I was really skeptical, I guess is the word, about everything that you saw against Samford happening again for a second game in a row, because if there's one thing this team has lacked, it's been consistency. So you saw Nick Timberlake play a great game against Samford and knock down shots and score 19 points. And you saw DeJuan Harris score, and you saw Hunter Dickinson with a massive night of 19 and 20 in that game. And it's like, are all of those things going to happen again for the second game in a row 2 days later for a team that really didn't ever do that all year, especially in Big 12 play? And so I was skeptical that would show up again, and it obviously didn't for at least half of the game. And then the point about your defense, or your point about the defense, is right on the money. It's funny too, because earlier today, in my Monday morning routine of wasting as much time as I possibly can, I was scrolling Twitter, and I saw that, I don't know what it was, 7 years ago today, I guess, was the day that Oregon beat KU in the Elite Eight in Kansas City to go to the Final Four. And obviously I was at that game and remember it well. And it was just a highlight run of kind of Oregon's stretch to get to the Final Four that year. And when they came to the Kansas part, obviously Oregon played a phenomenal game that night, and they played so well on the offensive end. Kansas had no answer. They couldn't find a way to stop them. Oregon was making shots, pulling them out of everywhere and knocking down big-time shots, clutch shots, deep shots, all of that. Well, I'm watching that clip this morning, and I'm seeing Oregon didn't win because Kansas didn't compete defensively. Oregon just made tough shots. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm watching Devontae Graham and LaGerald Vick and Josh Jackson and Frank Mason, and they are guarding these dudes. They are playing Bill Self contest and be tough and make it hard on your opponent defense. And Oregon just elevated its game and made some shots and maybe got lucky. Who knows? It doesn't matter. But as I'm watching that, that's the thing that stood out to me. Oh, that's Kansas defense. I just don't think we saw that this year very much, if at all. There were times, you certainly don't want to look back at this year and say it was a total trash year and they sucked, because they had some really good wins and some really good moments. The Houston win at home, Houston could be on its way to a Final Four or a national title even, and if you look back, or UConn could too, if you look back and you realize Kansas beat those teams, that's a great memory. And so they obviously had some moments, but if you looked at the snapshot of the team as a whole, they didn't play defense like that clip that I saw this morning. And part of that is those guys just being so young and new to Kansas and not understanding it. And the other part of it is just bad luck. I mean, sometimes you just don't have the pieces. So it's funny you bring that up, though, today, because I saw that this morning, and that just jumped out at me. I was like, oh, my gosh, those guys are playing defense, and even they didn't win. So. Yeah. Sometimes it's just not in the cards, right?
Yeah, and boy, that I remember that Oregon team because of being at the Final Four and watching them come so close to beating North Carolina that went and won a national championship 2 days later against Gonzaga that, we might be talking about, Oregon winning a national championship. That team was that good. I mean, Dylan Brooks and Jordan Bell and Tyler Dorsey, like they had some players, Peyton Pritchard on the floor, like they had some guys that can play. Like it wasn't just a bunch of upstart sort of scrappy guys. Like it wasn't Yale, finding St. Peter's finding a way to get to the Elite Eight or anything like that. Like that was a good team put together. So
NBA guys.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like thinking back to that team because man, I think they only lost by 1 to North Carolina in the Final Four. But the USC game, I want to compare it to that and look ahead in the same way. So that USC game was the worst loss in NCAA tournament history for KU. This is now the second biggest defeat in NCAA tournament history for KU. It's been 2 of them in the last 5 years. When looking back at that USC game, Matt, 3 of those guys that were starters on that court, Ochai, Christian Brown, David McCormick, started in the national championship the next year. DeJuan Harris played almost 30 minutes in that game against USC. Started in the national championship the next year. Jalen Wilson played 8 minutes, but it was sort of like, this guy, you see some things and maybe he can grow into a player that can help out.
Well, he had COVID. He was back from COVID.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, that was the deal there. So you knew Jalen Wilson, what he could do as a player and returning, and then he started in the national championship game. The only addition really for that team against North Carolina the next year was Remy. And that loss versus this one, who are the guys that you look at on the floor that you can say, these are the ones you can build upon and move on to next year and then add to? I mean, is DeJuan returning? Is Hunter returning? Is, Furphy, is he going to return? Is El Marco? I know he said he was returning, and McDowell, but, where are the guys where you're Ochai, Christian Brown, David McCormick, DeJuan Harris, on the floor, playing at least 28 minutes and starting, and those guys were, and Jalen Wilson starting the next year and adding Remy Martin.
Yeah, well, I think what's important to remember, and you're right on, because it's other than the personnel being different people and dudes and players, it's eerily similar in the way that you could return a lot of that team. And while nobody thought that was a bad thing, it was definitely a lingering question of, well, is it good enough?
Yep.
Same group.
Yep.
It's the same group. I mean, I saw the fans talking about that nonstop. Well, it was the same group, but guess what? It wasn't the same group because those guys took that loss to heart. Christian Brown is a competitor, and if you embarrass him, he's going to spend every waking minute of his life trying to find a way to A, get you back, and B, make sure it never happens again. That's how competitive he is. That was how tight they were as a group. Jalen Wilson, same way. Ochai, work. Nobody's gonna outwork me. And if we lose again, we lose again. But it's not going to be because I didn't perform or I wasn't good enough. I'm gonna work, and he did. And David McCormick, same way. Everybody's dogging David McCormick. His entire Kansas career, he just let it go. Put the headphones on, didn't listen, just kept working. He heard it all, but he just kept working. And those guys all kind of did that because of that loss. I mean, they were embarrassed. And it will be really interesting to see if this group has that same commitment. And if they're all back, DeJuan will be back, KJ will be back. I think Hunter will be back. And for my money, I think Furphy will be back. I mean, obviously Furphy could go. But, yeah, I think I'm expecting all 4 of them back myself. It's still early, and I haven't done a whole lot of research on it yet, but that's how it feels. And based on what I've kind of been talking to people about those guys throughout the season, I'd be a little bit surprised if they all aren't back, and if they all aren't, I bet 3 of them are. So then the question becomes, will they take it to heart the same way? Will they put in the work? Well, I know this without even having to think twice about it. I know DeJuan Harris will, and I know KJ Adams will. And that's because that's their character. That's because that's how they're wired. That's also because those guys know that group. KJ Adams is still in touch with CB every week pretty much. They played with Ochai, and they played with Jalen Wilson. And so they understand that standard. They know that by bowing out in the second round and having a rough year where they were 10-8 in the Big 12 and lost their last, the 3 last losses were by 30, 20, and 21. Like, that's not Kansas basketball, and those guys know that. And so, yeah, they're hurting for themselves and they're embarrassed, I'm sure, a little bit for themselves, but they're also thinking about those guys they played with and how, man, now my guys who are in the NBA have to go in their locker room and hear it. You know, they're gonna have to hear it from Jalen Suggs and Chet Holmgren and all of this stuff, right? When they're playing those guys at the next level, Gonzaga guys, well, they get to yell at my boys up there, and you know, and there's pride and there's a thing involved there that means you care, and that's not to say that Hunter Dickinson doesn't care or that Johnny Furphy doesn't care. We just don't know if they care, right? Like, this was their first year as Jayhawks, and this is all they know at Kansas. They didn't play with those other guys. They weren't around for 3-4 years to understand the standard and all of that. So I think they'll be back. I think they're built in the same way where they're competitive dudes, and they can't be happy with the way this ended either. But we've got to see if that translates into, now do they put all that extra effort in, and do they come out angry, and do they come out, you know, more determined than ever, and do they lead in a different way with the new crop that's coming in? Because we already know there are 3 freshmen coming in, and we already know that he's going to, you know, bring some portal guys in because they need shooting. So what do they do as far as setting the standard for that new group? It could be 6 guys. It could be 7 guys. That's a lot of guys. That's half your roster. So at some point, you know, it's got to be more than just DeJuan and KJ, because they had DeJuan and KJ this year, and they did everything they could, and they did the best they could, and they put their effort forth. And they can do more, I'm sure, but, like, they had that this year. So they need help elevating everybody else's game and reminding people what the standard is. And the coaches have to do that too. I mean, it can't just be players. It's more powerful usually when it comes from a player, but it's got to be a collective thing where they all look in the mirror and they all said, like, that wasn't acceptable. That's not us. And if we let it happen again, then that's on us. So let's make sure we don't, and let's go get it. And they will. I mean, that's what time has shown, you know, about Kansas and about Bill Self teams, is that they do rise to those occasions, and I'm expecting that to be absolutely what happens. Now, you know, we still have to see what that means and what it looks like next season, which is a long way away, but also not that far away. So there's a lot of questions to be answered, but I think those are the biggest ones. And comparing it to that USC game, like you said, I mean, that was the biggest thing, is that those guys that were a part of that and felt that and walked off at Hinkle Fieldhouse with their heads down. Some of them had towels over their heads. I mean, they were embarrassed. That was a beat down like Kansas has never seen before, and it was on them, and they were the face of it, and they were sick of that by the time they left the locker room. So everything from that point on was about getting revenge for that and making sure that was a thing of the past. And my God, man, they won the national title the very next year. Like, you can't do much better than that as far as trying to erase something bad that happened. It's incredible.
Matt Tate is our guest, R1S1 Sports, the Perpetual Sports Network, presented by 23rd Street Brewery. I gave my thoughts in the previous hour with the context of Bill Self's comments about looking ahead to next year. What did you make of those comments and maybe the reaction that's out there about Bill Self saying that?
Yeah, I think the comments were fine. If he was worried about how they sounded or what they said, he would have thought twice about his words. I think the only place he drew criticism was when the comments were you know, taken, I don't want to say out of context, but only the short part of the quote, right? Yeah. And that's not fair. It's just not fair. I mean, it's ridiculous to say Bill Self says he's been thinking about next year for the last month. Like, that's not what he said. I mean, semantics, the words he used, that is what he said, but he kept talking. And so anytime that was put on a graphic or on Twitter or you know, a snippet here or a snippet there, I just think that's, you know, that's just misleading a little bit. And it sounds good and it's sexy and all that. But look, even if that's all he said, mic drop, I'm leaving, that's all I'm going to say. Like, I don't even think you deserve to be killed for that, because every coach in every sport, in every program has a degree of looking ahead to next season throughout this season. That's the world we live in. I think, to be completely honest, like, if you've got a coach of your basketball team at your favorite school who's not thinking like that, then you probably need a new coach, because you're probably not getting the full commitment from the coach that you need to make sure you're in a position to win year after year after year. So I think his comments, when you take them in the proper context and you understand exactly what he was saying, which isn't hard to do, it's very easy to see that he's just telling you the truth. He's just stating facts, and he's saying exactly a little bit of what we just talked about. Like, this wasn't good enough. I hated looking to my bench and knowing I didn't have anything else there, both in terms of players, bodies, and talent. Like, I'm not going to let this happen again. And so that meant, staff lunches. That meant strategizing. That meant sitting in his office at his house thinking, while he's watching film, okay, what can I do here? Who can I get? What can I get? What do we need? What pieces do we need? All that stuff's happening every single year. It's just not every year that you're called to answer that, right? Because sometimes you don't have an ending like this. Sometimes it's an ending that people can quote unquote accept more. But this one was, unacceptable by Kansas standards and for Kansas fans, and so people are a little more critical then, and understandably so. That's what being a fan is. But yeah, I absolutely had no issue with any of that. And I think if your program is led by a coach who's not doing that, he's not doing it right.
Yep. Matt Tate, R1S1 Sports, Perpetual Sports Network, presented by 23rd Street Brewery. Matt, you're the man. Really appreciate the time. Enjoyed the conversations this year. We will talk and catch up when it gets closer to football season, man.
Yeah, sounds great. Always fun, and should be a heck of a finish to this tournament. I mean, there's a lot of good games left, and only 2 Big 12 teams. But goodness gracious, man, would it shock you if I told you Houston and Iowa State were going to play for the national title? That'd be pretty cool.
No, not the way they've looked. And Houston, I know they survived. They're up 11 points with a minute and a half to go. But yeah, it would not surprise me. And you know what? I know we'll let you go, but looking ahead, TJ Otzelberger apparently does not care about his current team because they landed a transfer in the transfer portal and a commitment from Deshaun Jackson earlier today. So clearly, TJ Otzelberger's already looking ahead to next year.
Yeah, they probably hate him. They probably want him to forfeit the rest of the tournament.
Yeah, how could you possibly be looking at next year by getting this transfer portal commitment in Deshaun Jackson?
You shouldn't do it. You got to focus only on today.
That's right. Matt, you're the man. Appreciate it.
Before I get out of here, 9:00 tonight on ESPN.
Yes.
KU women against USC. That's worth mentioning. That's worth remembering. If there's some Kansas fans listening that have forgotten that and they still have a little room for hoops in their heart, go watch that one. These girls might show up and give them a game tonight, and stranger things have happened. This is a really fun team, and they deserve the support too. So, it's a good brand of basketball too. So check it out if you guys are still awake and not totally depressed about the Gonzaga loss.
Made plays down the stretch when it mattered and got the win, and now get a chance to face off against Juju and USC. We'll see what happens.
That'll be fun. Yeah, Juju and Samaya, a Kansas City girl. That's
awesome.
That is awesome. Awesome for her. Awesome for the program. And it should be a fun battle. I'll tell you this, and you probably know a little about Samaya too. Like, she's not scared one bit. She's not going to back down one bit. You're an All-American. You're at USC. Cool, let's do this. And it's going to be fun to watch that because she may go right at her. They may lose, and she may still go right at her and have a game that makes you want to buy season tickets next year because she is one hell of a player, and it'll be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to that. I wish I was in L.A. tonight. I'm not, but I'll be watching it and writing my thoughts on that one just the same. So enjoy that if you watch. And yeah, Jason, thanks for having me all the time this year, and we'll talk again soon. I'll look forward to it.
All right, brother. Appreciate it, man. There's Matt Tate. Great stuff from him as always throughout this season. And Samaya with taking on Juju tonight. That'll be a fun one. 9:00, and Kansas getting past Michigan in the first round, and now get set for the USC Trojans and Juju, fantastic player. And I know we're talking Kansas, and we'll take a break here, but it was also. It sucked yesterday, the way that K-State played down the stretch. I mean, just could not hit a freaking shot. And I wanted to see the matchup against Iowa in the Sweet 16, but it is not to be. And K-State's season, in my opinion, ends. I know it was a 4-5, but ends prematurely. But that happens, and we'll see if Kansas can get past that and get to the Sweet 16 with a win over the 1 seed in USC. We'll take a timeout, come back, continue rolling more zone next. All right, we continue right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Jason Anderson with you. Dylan Michaels. We head up until 2 o'clock. We'll talk with Mick Schaefer coming up in the 1 o'clock hour, and we'll get some Learn Funniest Best. Also eliminate some teams in the bracket of sound. But let's talk some Royals baseball. Joining us now is Josh Kaiser, One Royal Way podcast. Josh, I understand it. You're not talking to us from your house. You are at a place that is making me jealous that I am here doing the show while you are in your current location. Where are you at today, bud?
We are in Arkansas, ready to cover this exhibition game between the Naturals and the Royals. We are jacked up and very excited about it. But caveat is it is currently raining both cats and dogs so much so that we are in a literal traffic jam outside the stadium.
Oh no, that's do they think it's going to be fine by 6 o'clock tonight?
The hourly forecast says that we should be good for game time. So we'll keep us in your thoughts and prayers, and we'll hope for the best. But
right.
As of right now, we're looking all right.
We're all thinking about you, Josh. We're all pulling for you.
Appreciate it,
and hoping that you make it through there. It's pretty cool, though. What do you think about the exhibition coming up tonight? Where I saw a picture of the clubhouse where it said a couple familiar faces, and it's got Bobby Witt's name on one of the lockers in the clubhouse and things like that. That the Royals, are doing this exhibition down in Springdale, Arkansas, with the Northwest Naturals.
It's definitely cool. I know that pretty quickly, so it's pretty cool for the town or the city of Springdale being able to come see Major League Baseball players and their Royals coming to town. And from what I understand, that they have the home locker room, which is very funny to me that the Naturals don't get their home field just yet. But it is kind of cool for the city of Springdale, I know for sure. But after that Waka hit by minor injury that we kind of have to deal with now, it kind of makes me a little skittish to witness something like that tonight. But I think it's going to be pretty fun, pretty laid back, and pretty good transition into the regular season for both teams.
Yeah, I haven't seen an update on if there are any X-rays yet. I know that there was a finger contusion bruise, got hit in the middle finger in the game yesterday, and they were going for X-rays to get they were confident that it was not broken or anything. But yeah, boy, you want to talk about a tough start to derail a lot of excitement would be that coming back and not getting the news that you want from those X-rays. But he did exit his final spring start with the finger injury. Hopefully it is not that big of a deal. We know that, Michael Wacha will be one of those guys in the starting staff, the rotation. Alec Marsh will be one of those guys as well. It was named the fifth starter. Jordan Lyles said, kind of caught off guard, didn't expect it, but said, I'll do whatever it takes to go and help the team win. But Alec Marsh, his dream comes true. He breaks camp with the big league club as the fifth starter. What's your reaction to Matt Quattrero, J.J. Piccolo coming together and the rest of the coaching staff and everybody involved to decide that Alec Marsh has earned that fifth starter spot?
It is definitely surprising. I was surprised by the news. Even last week I was pretty sure that it was going to be one of Daniel Lynch or Jordan Lyles being able to hit that fifth spot, and then it's only a few days later being proved like an idiot that I am that Alec Marsh is the guy. But it is very exciting, and we also talked about last week that it was time to go, and that was the message that was being sent with the Cole Reagans opening day starter role, and I think that they only reinforced that message bringing Alec Marsh in as the number 5, that these spots are now earned, that it's no longer given to you guys just because we pay you a lot or because you're high on our prospect list or anything like that. So it is nice to see that the resounding message to the fans and to the players and to themselves that it was go time and the best 26 is going to be out there at all times. So that was a little bit of a surprise to me, but it just kind of went as far as anything did at that point to kind of reinforce that it was go time.
Prado did not make the squad, though, even though he was having a dynamic spring. Is there anything to glean and take away from Alec Marsh being named the fifth starter, but then Prado, where Velasquez has had his struggles so far in the spring, and Prado has just looked dynamite throughout the spring, that it looked like if there was going to be a guy that makes the squad, that would be somewhat of a surprise. it would be Nick Prado, even though Nick Lofton made the squad and Dyron Blanco and Matt Sauer, Rule 5, those guys all made the squad. But Nick Prado is starting down in AAA. Is this a message that prove it down in AAA outside of spring training? And if you do that and Velasquez continues to struggle, we'll bring you up. Is there something more to it?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that they want to see more from Prado, obviously, with the new approach and the aggressive approach. They want to see it in a larger sample size. But I think it goes in a large and a more broad and general overarching thing is that they're going to kind of put more weight into previously larger sample sizes that have gone up against major league talent. And that kind of goes both with Marsh, who had a success at the major league level last year, that, you know, they do think that he can pitch at the major league level, and he proved it. But also he had Prado was striking out 48% of the time there points to the season last year. And now he looks like he's a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more willing to swing at pitches. So I think the larger sample size is a little bit less so proven than it was for Alec Marsh. So I think that it kind of went to show us that last season's sample sizes and the competitions they were going up against means more than the spring sample size. And it should. It absolutely should be the way it is. So I would be real. I do want to see it again, but he had roster flexibility. This does maintain inventory on a major league level that does preserve depth. So I can totally be on board with what it is. I can see the logic behind it, and it's good to go. And we actually had J.J. Piccolo, our co-host Joel, got to talk to J.J. last week. So the new episode dropped today of a J.J. Piccolo interview, and he kind of echoed that was the case there. So
yeah.
It was not only the implied message, but literally said from JJ. So I think that was pretty telling.
Yeah, and look, I mean, Alec Marsh didn't have an amazing season, but he was still better than Jordan Lyles. So it's like,
yes.
It's like, well,
hard to argue that.
It's like, he had a 5.5 ERA. Yeah, I know, and he was better than Jordan Lyles. So what's your point? Go ahead.
I think that there could be a pretty strong rebound from Jordan Lyles being the swing man, being the mop guy. I think that he got put out there for a lot of innings to eat, and that kind of put him in predicaments. There were plenty of blow-ups in the first, second, third inning, but there were other times where he had strong starts going into the sixth and seventh inning that he got blown up and shelved in those innings that then made this, the box score look worse than it actually was. So I think there is reality where Jordan Lyles is successful in this swingman role and does have a pretty good impact on this pitching staff moving forward.
We're visiting with Josh Kaiser, One Royal Way podcast. How close to the opening day roster was it that you thought it would be? I know you mentioned and you've been self-deprecating, and still, I mean, you know what you're talking about. But how close was the roster to what maybe you thought it was going to look like?
Yeah, coming into spring, it seemed like there was only maybe 2 or 3 spots that were kind of up for grabs anyways. And, I mean, the bullpen always kind of shakes loose and it has some weird things happen to it. That might be Kyle Zerpa. And I know the organization Zerpa, and ever 3 years ago, he kind of got put on the 40-man out of nowhere, and it kind of he continues to surprise me. But I mean, his stuff is still good. So that was the big surprise to me. I think he is still kind of trying to compete as a starter, and the fact that he kind of got put in the bullpen almost as a given. It sounded like when Matt Quatraro was asked about it. So that was obviously a surprise to me. But I think beyond that, it was like, who's that going to be? What's the utility situation going to shake up? So it turns out they need 4 different utility guys. They need 4 different multi-inning relief pitchers. And I think that was more of a surprise than I think a lot of us were anticipating.
Well, and one of the things that I would wonder, too, is, Adam Frazier, Garrett Hampson, Nick Lofton make the squad. And the conversation is about Nick Lofton made the squad. Awesome. Good for him. That's great. Michael Massey with the back tightness, how long he's going to be out. The Royals don't expect him to be out very long, even though he's going to start the season on the IL. Is it a continual tryout to a degree for Nick Lofton or even Garrett Hampson or even Adam Frazier that, when Michael Massey's ready to come back, one of you got to go. Is it Garrett Hampson? Is it Nick Lofton that Lofton made the squad based on the back tightness for Michael Massey? What do you think? How do you think that shakes out with maybe an extended audition for a couple of these guys for whenever Michael Massey gets healthy?
Yeah, we were talking about Massey earlier in the car ride, actually, that there's a chance that Nick Lofton just doesn't give this job up whenever, and that's assuming that he is the opening day second baseman. I think there's still a case to be made for Adam Frazier in that role, but I digress on that. It was more of like there's a reality where Nick Lofton does win that job. He has shown everything he needs to show both in the end of last season and in what he's done in spring to get that everyday opportunity. And they brought Adam Frazier in knowing that he was going to probably be more of a bench guy, a depth guy that can get plenty of opportunities, but it wasn't going to be necessarily a everyday role. So we think that there's definitely a reality where Nick Lofton takes the second base job and just doesn't let go of it. But at the same time, Massey's got options, Lofton's got options. You know, they brought Frazier and Gary Hampson in for a reason. So there is a emphasis on depth this year. I think that's going to go across the board. And I think that that's going to be the case. So they're not going to rush Massey back by any means, but I do also think that they're going to leave it open to, whoever earns this job, whoever gets to play second base for the Kansas City Royals is going to be there because they earned it. So I think that's going to be the overarching theme all across all this team.
The MLB players put out a survey. I think it was a couple days ago. It was over the weekend when it came out, I believe, that I read it at MLB.com, a pretty decent place to go to if you want to look at surveys, apparently.
Sure. Pretty good at baseball coverage. Yeah.
I mean, if you're looking for information about baseball, whatever. There was a player survey that they put out on the teams that could surprise this year, most likely teams to surprise. And number one, the Royals came in at number one. They're screwed now. There's no way they're sneaking up on people,
Yep.
Josh. I mean, they were going to sneak up on somebody. Now the players know they're going to be a surprise team. So it's no longer a surprise to them. 105 losses probably now?
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty fair. I think that they're going to get everybody's best shot every time they
everybody's World Series Game 7.
The target is now on their back. Unbelievable if they had to do this to us before the season starts. I think there's still plenty of credit to that. I mean, we were kind of brainstorming what we're going to talk about tonight when we record the podcast for this week about our season preview about what our Royals record prediction is going to be, and there's just such a range of outcomes that could happen for this Royals. I mean, they could be 2 games at 100 and win the division. It's a weird reality that we live in. The only thing we're pretty sure they're not going to be post. So they have a wide. Some of that kind of trimmed in the postseason contention. So that's very exciting. It's no longer, they could be 500. That's probably the 199th the 99th percentile outcome now because of what they've done in the offseason and the strides that they've gone to fill some of the gaps is potential postseason berth. But it is still unlikely, I think, and I think that's where all of us land, that we're still wishfully dreaming that outcome comes, but it is part of the range of outcomes, as is the 100-loss season again.
All right, before we let you go, I don't know if this is giving away anything or not, but do you have a prediction on what you think the record will be this year?
Okay, so I'm going to give it away. I think it's going to be, and this is probably going to change because I feel like we're going to go in there, we're going to be around, and we're going to see this team in person, and we're going to get that hopium inside of us.
There it is.
And this win total is going to skyrocket between now and we record. But I went in thinking it was going to be a 77-win team this year. That's what I predicted last year. So take that for what it's worth, which is absolutely nothing. But by tonight, man, I might be a 90-win guy. We'll have to see.
You dirty dog.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I'm very excited about this tonight.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm happy for you. I have them at 77 and 85, so you dirty dog. Hey, we'll see. Hopefully we're both, you know what? Hopefully we're both wrong in a good way.
We'll be licking our 59-win wounds by the end of the year.
No, hopefully we're wrong in that they're, 83 and, 79. That's why we're wrong. Or 90 wins like you talked about coming out of the game tonight against the Naturals.
And you'll be a little bit richer from the futures
That's
that you
exactly
put in.
Right.
Yeah?
That's exactly right. You're darn
There you
right.
go.
Because if they do that, then win a division. Come on, let's make some money. Josh, you're the man. Appreciate it, sir. Enjoy the game tonight. That's awesome, man. And we'll talk next week when there are a few games under our belt, and we'll actually have some baseball to talk about. There'll be 3 games into the season.
It's here. Opening day, Thursday.
Yes,
the
sir.
season is here. I am jacked up. Appreciate you guys having me. I'll talk to you later, boys.
Awesome. There's Josh Geyser. Great stuff from him. He is down in Springdale, Arkansas. The Northwest Naturals taking on the Kansas City Royals tonight, 6:05, in a little exhibition down in Northwest. Cool deal for the city and that AA organization there for the Royals. Been apart for 15 years, late 2000s. So about 15 years they've been a part of the organization. So cool stuff tonight, 6:05 with that exhibition. And, of course, opening day on Thursday. He's got 77 and 85 for the Royals this year. We'll take a timeout. We'll come back, continue rolling, wrap up the hour. Mick Schaefer joins us at 1 o'clock. More Zone next. All right, we continue right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Jason Anderson with you, Dylan Michaels. We'll talk with Mick Schaefer coming up at 1 o'clock. Our coverage of the NCAA tournament, every game, just as we've done in the past, right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB and ESPN Kansas City. Brought to you by Xfinity, Greenlight Dispensary, Hollywood Casino, and Trailside RV. We got Learn Funniest Best coming up in the 1 o'clock hour. And, of course, we will go through teams that have been eliminated in the bracket of sound and the sound bites that are associated and connected with those teams. We will do that as the 1 o'clock hour progresses with Mick Schaefer. We'll also talk some college basketball with Mick Schaefer, Bill Self's comments. We talked about that in the 11 o'clock hour. I had no problem with his comments. I thought there was some context needed to be added into it when talking about looking ahead to next season. It's the CEO aspect of it. It's the continual building of the roster construction. And as evidenced, Iowa State got landed a transfer portal kid today. Charlotte's best player committed to Iowa State today. So if you're a Cyclone fan, you're probably upset with TJ Otzelberger for focusing on next year. Thinking about next year and not the fact that you got the number one offense in America that you're getting ready to go up against. Number one team in offense in Ken Palm, and you're playing them in the Sweet 16 and you're out recruiting. Where are your priorities, sir? Where are your priorities? So we'll talk about some other things. And, of course, we spent the first hour talking about L'Jarius Sneed, the compensation, not the competition, but the compensation for L'Jarius Sneed, the third-rounder in next year's draft, and the exchanging of seventh-rounders in this year's draft, what it means for the Chiefs. We'll talk to Mick Schaefer about those things and more next.
natural food to Midwestern families since 1958. Enjoy healthier food, more free time, free delivery, and better value. Go to GuaranteedFoods.com.
All right, we continue right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. One more hour to go. Hanging out with Mick Schaefer, KSHB 41 Sports Director.
I'll be your
Huckleberry?
I'll be your Jodie Foster to your Annette Bening.
Okay.
The Naiad movie.
Sure. I haven't seen it yet.
It's a good movie. I didn't know much about her story. I'd heard of her. I remember her being an announcer and everything. There's people, though, I've learned in the marathon swimming community that aren't buying that swim.
Really?
And some of her other swims.
Interesting.
And she has
Controversy.
told some tall tales about some of her swims before that she made and didn't make. Supposedly at one point in the swim, hours and hours, this is like a day and a half into her swim. It took like 58, 60 hours, something like that. Supposedly, her speed went from 1.5 miles per hour to 3.9 miles per hour. Now, others were like, you know what? The currents could have changed and all that. And like, okay, some people are like, that's possible. But then they're like, Michael Phelps' top speed in his, I think, 400-meter Olympic winning setting time was 3.7 miles per hour. So that's a fast current, if so, after you've been swimming for a day and a half.
It's called a wave.
It looks like maybe you're holding on to the boat.
Might
at
have
that point.
got assisted there a little bit. Yeah.
So, but great. It's a really good movie. And so that's what I'm Jodie Foster.
Great.
That's bottom line.
Jodie Foster, presented by Empower Payments, boosting your business and charity with every transaction. Learn more at empowerpayments.com. Mick, you pumped about all the chalk in the tournament, right?
This has gone this is how you want it. Thursday and Friday.
Agreed. I'm
12, 13 upsets.
Yeah.
I think 5 on Thursday, and seed-wise. And then 8 underdogs won on Friday. And that we had one upset, I think, the last 2 days.
It's NC
so
State.
it's not going well for my game plan to just bet money line on all the underdogs. I think maybe after the first round you should stop doing that. But I'm surprised. Now it took overtime in a couple of those games.
It did. I mean, Houston tried to give it away. They tried.
Houston tried to give it away. Saturday night. What was the game that went
Creighton.
to OT? Oh, Creighton, yeah.
Yep, Creighton and Oregon. Yeah. Cousinard is really, really good. Really good. It's just tough. The player pool, that's just how it shakes out sometimes, you know.
Are you have Cousinard?
No, I did not.
Oh. I think our crock pot at home is made by Cousinard.
Really?
Yeah.
No, it's a really good one.
How do you pronounce that, by the way? Do you know?
I think it's
It was Cuisinart.
Cuisinart? Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to go with Cousinard.
Okay.
I'm going to go with that one. No, he was. I was having a conversation with we were at a break, and I had the second pick of the next round, and I was having a conversation with him about just different guys.
With Cousinard himself?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
With the guy that had the first break, with the first pick, and he was like, I'm thinking about Cousinard and Shahada Wells, and I'm like, yeah, he doesn't like I want Cousinard.
You should go with Wells.
I would go
think.
with
I can't believe he
Wells.
hasn't been drafted yet.
Yeah, he plays so well. You should totally draft him. And then he went Cousinard. I'm like, all right, I'll take.
Did you have Wells?
I took Wells, McNeese State, and
yeah.
got like 12 points. You know, not the 70.
No.
Cousinard
No.
got. Those are the things that.
I don't know if it was just me, but I didn't care who won that game at all. But the moment they
I
told
didn't
the
either.
story
I was loving the game. I was loving the
about
action.
his grandmother,
Yeah.
immediately became an Oregon fan because I wanted the
Yeah.
story to keep going. That
Yeah.
was awesome.
Very cool. Very cool. Yes. Gary Dieter was sweating it out, clearly, with him being a big Creighton fan now.
Yeah.
Big
It seems
alum
like
there. Yeah.
it seems like this weekend was either overtime games or 40-point blowouts.
Blowouts. Yeah. Unbelievable, man. So, yeah, that's going on. And L'Jarius Sneed traded for 7 first-rounders, which was a real
right,
surprise. Excuse me, 3 first-rounders in the 2025 draft.
Mike Ditka is in the front office now for the Tennessee
Wait a minute,
Titans.
sorry.
So 7 first-rounders, yep.
1 third round, not 3 first-rounders, 1 third-round pick in the 2025 draft in exchanging of 7th-rounders. When I saw the compensation, I was underwhelmed. And I knew exactly what the reaction would be of people being underwhelmed. But then I went back and thinking about the conversations we were having. And when we were having conversations on the air, We were presenting it from a realistic standpoint of what should be expected, and looking back at the historical, trades that have taken place with cornerbacks that are around the age of L'Jarius Sneed that are good, and what the compensation was. The conversation was that probably the best you can get is a third rounder. But even while talking about that, it's like, man, yeah, but they should get a second rounder for L'Jarius Sneed. And they got, roughly what is probably going to be late teens to early 20s in terms of a third rounder pick from where Tennessee ends this year. And then they, exchange, swap seventh rounders. So they got a third round pick. It's tough because Sneed is so good, but historical, precedent of trades, it's kind of around what you were going to get for him anyway, and there wasn't a bidding war. There weren't 3 or 4 teams that were saying, we got to get L'Jarius Sneed. He's the final piece of our puzzle. It was the Titans. The Colts bowed out. The Lions went and got Carlton Davis, and then it was the Titans. And I think if you're Brett Veach, you get to a point to where you go, this is the best we can get. And so let's do it because we're also getting the third rounder and the $20 million in cap space.
That's the biggest deal, right? In that us prognosticators aren't always right on what should happen, and the NFL has always valued the mystery of draft picks, right, over the known quantity even of really good players. And cornerback, it's really, I mean, how many 4-year contracts are you going to have? I mean, basically a two contract position, right, for big money, and so not much after that. And so if that's the best deal, that's the best deal. And I think the biggest thing for Kansas City was like, okay, that freed up $20 million. That could be 2 or 3 more players you could get right away. The only thing for me, I wish that third-round pick would have been this year, just more of an immediate return on him.
I don't think there's any chance I don't think there's any chance that next year in the third round at Tennessee Titans selection, the Chiefs will be picking. If that makes sense. They're not going to use that third-round pick next year. I think that'll be packaged in another trade. I think it'll be packaged this year. Whether it's moving up in the second round if somebody's there or using it to move up in the first round. Because part of it was like if you got a third rounder this year, yes, it would help out to get an extra player, but you could use if there's a tackle that's there at like 21 or 22, all of a sudden it's like, look, this is a guy that shouldn't be here. This is a position that we can solidify. Let's use a third rounder. Well, you don't have that many picks this year. Do you want to use one of those? Well, now let's use next year's third rounder. And throw in a sixth rounder this year, moving from 32 to get up to 22 and take that. And that now your tackle, you got your tackle along with L'Jarius Sneed sort of helping you along the way, and the cap space. I don't think they're picking at that spot next year in the third round for the Titans. I think this is used as ammunition, go into chamber to just go and. We have the pool of money.
That makes sense,
and you can go and use it.
Yeah, and even if they would have got it this year, maybe it's used as ammo this year. So, yeah, I'm good. I think the biggest part of that whole deal was just freeing up more cap space to make maybe another big run at somebody out there or a couple runs at 2 smaller somebodies out there.
Or 3 smallers.
3 smallest. Yeah.
3 smallers, 2 biggers.
1 large, 2
1
mediums, or 3 smalls. It's like, what are we getting tonight for pizza? Let's just get 2 mediums.
I feel like the value is from medium to large, right?
So,
I mean, if you're getting 2 mediums, you're not paying that much more for the large. That's where they get you. That's why they entice you to get the large. I mean, it's only a little bit more. It's only a few dollars. Just get the large player.
Which I don't think maybe, and you can help me out because you've always got the running total. They would maybe use 15 of that 20, have enough left for the draft class, and enough left to just play around with in the fall.
They're sitting about 27, 28 million right now. Take away $5 million for the draft, so you're looking at 23. Take away $4 million for what Brett Veach is to keep the lights on throughout the season. So you're looking at about $19 million that you could, use and still have your draft class and the extra money going into the season to whether it's get somebody off waivers, make a trade, practice squad guys, moving guys up and down. You just need that extra leeway throughout the season. You can't be at the ceiling of the cap. So that would still allow them to go out and get a number of players that, could equal up to about $19 million in the salary cap this year, plus the draft coming in. They've got some flexibility to do some things now where with L'Jarius Sneed, they would have been stuck. They also would have had L'Jarius Sneed. So the consolation prize was that you get one of the best cornerbacks in the league. Plan A clearly was this. And I think the biggest deal here is they needed to free up the cap space. And I think there was probably an unacknowledged scenario or maybe a scenario that just didn't want to believe could happen with the Chiefs just dropping the franchise tag on L'Jarius Sneed. Just getting to a point to where you couldn't trade him and say, all right, we're just going to take the franchise tag off him and he's going to go somewhere else and we're going to hopefully get great compensation in the third round for the free agency and the formula there, because we're not going to go out and sign a bunch of people. So we'll get a third round.
That would have
next
been
year.
next year's compensatory pick as well, right?
At the end of the third round. So they got a better one than just simply taking the franchise tag off of L'Jarius Sneed. And I know people are like, well, let him play on the franchise tag and then next year let him walk and you get the comp pick in 2026. Yes, you get L'Jarius Sneed this year, but also, filling out a roster. You got to fill out the entire roster. And there's a deferring to Brett Veach in what he's been able to do in figuring some of these things out. And I think there's an element, Mick, of them saying, we're actually going to choose Trent McDuffie. That in 2 years, when McDuffie's 4 years are over and you get into the fifth-year option or not, which is typically when you would want to extend that player, he's going to be 2 years younger than L'Jarius Sneed, and it's probably the end of Chris Jones. So right now you at least have Chris Jones if you walk on L'Jarius Sneed. In 2 years, are you going to be wanting to pay high cornerback money and then pay Trent McDuffie? Or you say, well, we're probably going to need Trent McDuffie in that money because Chris Jones may not be around, so we're choosing Trent McDuffie in 2 years as a 25-year-old rather than L'Jarius Sneed right now as a 27-year-old.
So you're saying they're already looking ahead to next year and the years after that? I mean, they've given up on this coming season?
Yeah, I can't believe Andy Reid has done that, And Brett Veach doesn't even care about this year that he's thinking about that. I mean, they're 1, 2, 3 Cancun already for next year. It's ridiculous that they did that.
We take it one game at a time, but several years at a time we'll look ahead. Yeah.
I joked about, when we went to break because Iowa State landed one of the bigger portal entries so far, the big player from Charlotte that committed to Iowa State today. And I'm like, well, obviously TJ Otzelberger does not care about Illinois because he's already thinking about next year.
Iowa State.
And the year after that. No, Illinois game coming up this week.
Oh, gotcha, yeah.
In the Sweet 16. He does not care about Illinois whatsoever. He's already thinking of next year, already building for next year. It's like a fantasy football dynasty. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm trying to win this year, but I got these keepers. I got this guy. So I'm sort of thinking ahead as well. Like, no, you got the number one offense in America. You're getting ready to play them as a defensive guy, and you're thinking about some dude from Charlotte? I mean, come on,
He
TJ.
needs to start thinking ahead on his wardrobe because he's still wearing his shirts from high school.
I think we talked about that. He takes his son's shirt, dries it for an hour, and then puts it on.
His son's 12.
There was a there was a Twitter thread of what coaches look like, what their profession would be if they're not coaches.
That's good.
And TJ Otzelberger was a high school gym teacher.
Yes. It's perfect.
Just there with the shirt. No. Otzelberger was a strength and conditioning coach, I think is what it was, a college strength and conditioning coach, because he had this medium shirt, and, no neck, and just looking into the camera, right? That thread was, I got to go find it. It was really, really good when they would name it, and you're like, oh, my God, he looks just like that.
He
That's
looks
exactly
like
what he
the
looks
guy
like.
that's going to end up with a bloody face before every football game because he's headbutting the guys with helmets on beforehand, right? That's what he does.
It's like Anthony Sherman told the story of who thought somebody thought he was Matt Moore, I think it was. Matt Moore thought Anthony Sherman was a strength and conditioning coach.
It's hilarious.
It's like, why is he wearing pads? What are you doing? He thought he was a strength coach on the team. It's like, I'm the fullback.
There's not many football players built like Anthony Sherman because first of all it's the height, right? You get the no neck when you have no height, right?
A lot of strength and conditioning coaches that look like Anthony Sherman and look like TJ Otzelberger. Not necessarily a lot of basketball coaches and football players that are running around there and putting on the pads. Mick, I know you're excited about the rules change. The rules committee has approved that the hip drop tackle.
They have approved it.
It is unanimous. Hip drop tackle has been taken out of the NFL.
It's going to be so. That's going to suck.
I think it's going to be officiated pretty
easy.
I
bet, I'm sure.
I think it's going to be no issue whatsoever.
No, I mean, I can't. I mean, there's with like targeting, especially college targeting, that exists in like 80% gray area, right? I mean, there's so many times you slow down, like, well, the offensive player's lowering his head too.
Yeah.
Right?
Hold on. This guy's getting hit from the side, and his head then goes down where the other guy was going for the shoulder.
Yes.
And now they hit, and you're going to kick the guy out of the game?
And he's out of the game, right? So already that rule right there is rarely black and white. This is going to be more gray area than that. I mean, I still like, I can't picture a hip drop tackle, right?
You can't picture one?
Not really.
Oh.
I mean, it's a new term. It's basically tackling. Guys, I mean, there's
Drop
not.
tackle is
if
a
you've
tackle.
ever played football, right? I can remember my first years playing, and you had this perfect wrap job,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to put your head on the side and your head up and all this stuff and drive through, and you take the dummy to the ground.
This is this is hip drop tackle.
Oh, that is it. Now I can picture it.
Yep.
Now I can
Yep,
picture
that's
it.
the hip drop tackle. But anyway,
Yeah.
go ahead.
When you get to a game, you just bring the guy down. And everybody will applaud you. However you want to get the guy down, get him down.
Hip drop tackle.
And that's
called
part
tackling.
Of it. Yeah, I mean, like I just don't. So you're got to stay on your feet to take the guy down. And what happens? Like we talked about Derrick Henry. What if he's a lot bigger than you and you're
It's
like
like-
a cornerback?
it's
and
like
are
when
they
they-
gonna call that.
When they strap the thing around the waist and they're pulling the sled, just like running and pulling a sled.
I just don't
it's just
think
that's going to be the
as
guy.
opposed to targeting a lot of times. I don't know if there's ever intent of like, I'm going to run and get this guy and I'm going to take my weight down and drop my hip and I'm going to swivel and I'm going to pull him down to where he hopefully has some sort of hip injury.
And I'm
all
gonna
in
land
like a
on his
nano-
lower body.
And I'm deciding this all in like a nanosecond.
And you have to land on their lower
There's
body.
never intent. It's just going to be like
Here's the
guys throwing their palms to the air.
Here's the actual rule.
But these are football guys all approving it. So, I mean.
Well, it's the people that are in charge of football. Here it is. This is the explanation right here.
It's going
See
to be
what I'm
word
saying?
for word. Yeah.
Carl Sheffers. He put his hand upon his hip. He dipped. They dipped. We dipped. 15 yards. There is no foul for hip drop tackle. It's easier for me to do the Carl Sheffers impression when I already am losing my voice anyway. But it is a foul if a player uses the following technique to bring a runner to the ground. A, grabs the runner with both hands.
Oh, boy.
Or wraps the runner with both arms.
First of all, that's every tackle ever. Okay, so far we're every tackle ever.
And B, unweights himself by swiveling and dropping his hips and or lower body, landing on and trapping the runner's legs at or below the knee. Those are 3 different thresholds it has to get to be a hip drop tackle. How many of those thresholds will be met on the majority of the hip drop tackle 15-yard penalties? Maybe 1.
Hopefully not. Yeah,
Maybe 2.
none that
How
are-
often will it be all 3 of those things? Because again, you have to land on their lower body. You have to land on the knee or ankle area.
And so this is
for
going
it
to be a
hip-
judgment call, right? And they can't review it or
Won't be a
anything
review,
like that.
No. Nope.
I
won't
can't
be.
picture this. What's the swivel part of all this? I remember, was it the Dalton Knox, right?
It's when you hold on and then
kind
you
of the-
pick your legs up and then you sort of swing around on the hip. You put your hands upon their hip and then you lift
dip.
your legs up to dip.
They dip.
We
And we
dip.
dip.
Yep.
How long before there's a 4th and 10, 4th and 11 guy trying to reach for the first down marker, 15-yard penalty for the hip drop tackle? I mean, that is week 1, maybe.
And everybody's going to have their palms to the sky. Like, I'm just trying to tackle him. There's no intent there. There's just.
The text message said, it's already it's going to be one of the first plays that happens on that Thursday night game with the Chiefs playing in it.
Yep.
It's going to be, well, of course, the Chiefs. Of course, it's the Chiefs that
That's
get
how
the
they were in
benefit
the
of
Super
hip
Bowl.
drop.
They've been hip drop tackling the
Hip
whole
drop
time.
tackling. Chiefs, of course, get the 15-yard penalty. Hip drop tackle. Isaiah Pacheco, he's fine. Pacheco's fine. How else is he supposed to tackle that dude? He's pulling everybody 15 yards.
You see Mahomes? He throws from his hip. He does every time.
Good thing
Ban that.
Collinsworth will be be there to audit and make sure he sees every single
Guys.
moment, points it out.
I don't know, Mike.
This is Patrick Mahomes in his off-platform throws. Get out of here. What is he doing? Yeah. And then Gene Steratore will come in and go, you know, guys, you are right about what you're talking about there. Jim, you make a great point on the hip drop tackle right there. It's what they're trying to eliminate in football right now. The guy clearly then picks himself up, takes him to the ground. He's got his hips and his legs on the other guy's legs. This meets all of the thresholds. This is absolutely a 15-yard penalty, and that's why they're going to enforce this rule this year, Jim. It's just what they're going to do. Tony, you had it right. Thank you, Gene.
And he's been doing NCAA too.
That's right,
He
yeah.
does. But that's my
and he-
favorite official of all time. I've interviewed
too.
him before. He did major college basketball and the
football.
NFL, and he knows his stuff. And what game? I don't remember one of the games where it was thrown into the front court. The guy tipped it. It went to the back court, and he went and got it all. And everybody thought it was over and back. And then he's like, nope. He's
Rule
got to
of
have
3.
position.
Rule of
First-
3. Got to have possession. Got to have both feet, the ball in the front court with possession of it.
Yeah.
But he always starts with, if you notice, as Gene Steratore, you know, guys,
Yeah.
Every time. It's like, let's go to Gene's territory. You know,
No,
guys, what you're talking about there, you're absolutely right. With this guy on the baseline, this is what it's going to be. I do like Gene's territory, though.
I would say, there's so many tackles where it's like, to get a guy down that's running really fast away from you, you kind of have to unweight yourself to where, like, okay, your body mass and your body weight is going to the ground and you're holding on, and that's the best way to bring the runner down. So
let me just say, as a guy who roots
I hope
for a
it gets
team,
called less than 5 times the whole year, but
no, it's going to be like
500.
it's going to be the freedom of movement like 6 years ago in college basketball when they implemented all the new
Right.
rules, and it's going to be, I've called it a shock to the system. They're going to want to come right out and a shock to the system, and just so you know, immediately get it out of your head that this is going to happen.
I don't know that it's in any of these guys' heads. I think it's happened so fast. You're like, you hit a guy, you're bringing him down, right? This is.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I said, I don't think there's ever intent for that to happen, and so guys are just gonna be floored when they get called for it.
I want to submit a rule change to the competition committee.
Did they do the kickoffs yet? Did they?
I haven't seen any ruling on that.
They said so far in the tweet.
Okay.
They made sure to put that in there. So
I want to submit a rule to the competition committee that until at least 2038, at 2038 we can readdress this, the quarterback is not allowed to be touched.
Okay, gotcha.
And breathing in the vicinity of a quarterback is a 15-yard penalty. Until about 2038. After that, let's readdress it.
How about if you win the everybody can be touched unless you win the Super Bowl. That's one of the perks. The next year, you can't be touched.
You get the 32nd pick in the draft, but your quarterback cannot be touched next year.
Yes.
So breathing on him, 15-yard penalty. Or it's like Chris Jones touching the shoulder pads of Tom Brady. Yeah. Whoa, you hit the shoulder pads too hard. That is actually 15-yard penalty.
That's only slightly dumber to me than the hip drop tackle rule.
Hey, trying to eliminate as many injuries as possible. And
pretty soon it's like, well, we're not going to play next season. That we found that studies have shown that's how we're going to make the game safest. I've always said it's like, they're like, safety's our top priority. I'm like, no, it can't. It cannot be your top priority. It's football. Safety, really, in any sport.
Safe as possible. As safe as possible. In a sport where it's not an if, but when you get injured, can you make it safer? Yeah. Like in rugby, we talked about this when they first proposed it, that the NRL, the National Rugby League, had banned hip drop tackle in their league. This is the first year that they've been going, and the first month.
Know the rules to rugby.
Yeah, the first couple of months, the complaint was that most of the penalties and the fouls were not actually hip drop tackles. It was just an overreaction to it early on of that. And I expect the same thing to be the case. That we've already seen that in action with rugby. That the biggest complaint is that's not hip drop tackle though. That's not what the rule was implemented to outlaw, to ban.
It's similar to the so when they instituted the falling with all your weight on the quarterback, right?
Yep.
That, to me, and I believe the intent of the rule was, okay, you can't drive through, pick him up, and then drive him down.
Yeah.
It somehow morphed to Chris Jones scraping back, sacking David Carr.
Mm-hmm. Or
Derek Carr.
Whichever one. He sacked them both.
And,
the same.
And them falling down together on the ground.
While
and
holding the ball.
Yes.
He's got the ball in his hands.
And to me, that's not the spirit of the rule. He's not driving his weight down.
Yeah.
He's just falling on him. And that happens in football, guys. And
typically you're taking the guy to the ground, yeah.
Yeah, so, I could see that turning into something that it's not like it was in rugby.
We'll take a timeout. We will come back and we will eliminate some teams in the bracket of sound. We got Learn Funniest Best, all to come here on this Monday edition. Hanging out with Mick Schaefer, presented by Empower Payments. EmpowerPayments.com. More Zone next. All right, let's get to the bracket of sound. Eliminate some teams here, okay? Unfortunately, for those teams and those pieces of sound.
Well, wait a second. Do we have 32 to get to
32.
today?
We're not going to do it all today.
Wow.
We're not going to do it all today.
Wow. We're doing just Fridays?
No, we're going to do we're going to wrap up one bracket today.
Okay.
Or region, I should say.
Gotcha, yeah.
Wrong Mother Bleeper region, because on Friday we only played 2 pieces of sound. There were only 2 games in the Wrong Mother Bleeper bracket on Thursday. There were multiple 4 and 5 and 6 games in other regions. There were only 2 in the entire South. Yeah, I know, right. Yep. Oh, I had to, just because of which sound bites were playing and everything.
So this is just one region.
One region.
We're going from
the first round,
16 down to 4.
Yep, that's right. The first round, and then on into the second round. And as we see these teams that have won and have moved on, the number 1 seed, Houston, the Cougars, knocked off Longwood. And Longwood is out of the tournament, and that means this sound is gone.
You know, the dong bong.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Longwood is gone.
Dong bong. Again, great job by the committee pairing that sound with that team.
Sometimes those things randomly work out. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I'm not sure. The 8-9 matchup.
That was less, was it not?
That was less. Yep, that was less. I think he's probably happy that Longwood is gone. Nebraska and A&M played each other in the first round, and Texas A&M advanced. That means Nebraska's gone, and so is this sound.
First of all, everybody wants to know how you're feeling right now as you try to get ready for this game.
I'm good.
You back in practice full time and full go and all that?
Yeah.
All right. So how excited are you for the chance to get on the field again, especially knowing what you went through last year?
I'm good.
Holy crap!
All right, man. Well, good luck on Sunday. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
who was that?
Kadarius Toney. The entire interview on media availability for Kadarius Toney on the Border Patrol.
That was the entire?
It's the entire thing, because Steven stepped in and was like, all right, man, thanks. Appreciate it.
Well, Nate finally went. He knew, I'm going to go away from a yes or no question because he's just doing yes or no. And how excited are you? I'm good. That's my answer 2 answers ago.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm good.
Nate stepped in and stopped the fight.
Steven.
Steven did, yeah.
Like, throw the towel.
Throw the damn
towel. Nebraska eliminated, and so is that sound. James Madison and Wisconsin, the 12-5 matchup. James Madison advanced, the 5 seed out. That was this.
So I've been waiting for this.
Sorry.
What were you gonna say?
I just wanted to address.
Went up to the podium while President Joe Biden.
I just always wanted
distracted.
You
clearly gave him. It was the oldest thing in the book, and Joe fell for it. Really quick. It was what's over there. Like, I mean, come on. What is? I love it.
I've always admired, obviously the president at the podium it's iconic, right? It's iconic, and how he usually addresses the nation to my fellow Americans. And that's all I wanted to say, dude. That's it. I just wanted to go up there and say I shouldn't have started off with I've always wanted to do this.
You would have started off with my fellow Americans. That would have been such a showstopper. I don't think they would have kicked you off. If somebody gets up to the podium and says, "My fellow Americans," it's like immediate, like, all right, what's this dude about to say?
Oh man,
yeah, I like that.
No, but
that'd have been great.
Pat knew that I was. I
was
in over my head.
Knew right away when you pointed. He was like, "There ain't nothing over there."
There is.
This is a flanking move. If I know Travis, and he's a flanker. This is a flanking move.
Before, Pat, that was shout out to Pat, man, for keeping me from embarrassing myself at that podium, man, in front of the world.
Travis Kelce and his attempted presidential speech, my fellow Americans.
I thought it was staged, but apparently it wasn't.
I thought it was staged too until that whole thing came out. I really, honestly, what would have happened if he'd have walked up there and said, "My fellow Americans, Patrick, Actually, Travis, go ahead. Now I'm
Go
curious
ahead.
as what you're going to say.
Especially Taylor Swift. I would love
yes.
to date you because that was beforehand.
I'm going to bring a bracelet to the show coming up this summer, and I hope you're willing to talk to people backstage, even if your voice needs to be arrested. The 4-3 matchup, Duke and Vermont. 4-13 matchup, Duke and Vermont. Duke won. That means the 13 seed is eliminated, and Vermont is out. That was this sound.
And still have leeway because you threw the ball 30,
Yeah, because
40
the
yards
safety's
downfield?
not flying up. Come on, man.
Oh, well, that's just
You
a
almost
bad
got me
take.
cussing on here, buddy.
That's a bad
Go
take.
ahead.
I mean, what the
Wow. A lot of faith in
We
Marco.
just went 0 to 60.
You guys got to put
Hey, we woke him up.
Hey, everybody.
We woke him up. Garrett's
Welcome
here.
back to the show.
I'm pissed off.
He told him go ahead. Steven
Did
did
say
say
go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead and cuss. I'm just realizing that the Wrong Mother Bleeper region is one that we did with Todd, so you weren't here for the wrong.
I haven't heard any of these, yeah.
Any of these sounds, so it's a good choice. Randomly, the committee did that as well.
I mean, you're just you should never actually try to plan something out because it'll never go this good.
I agree with you. So that was the 4 and 13 matchup. The 6-11, the 3-14 already took place. We played those on Friday. 7 versus 10. The 10 seed Colorado ended up winning. Florida ended up winning as the 7 seed. So the 10 seed Colorado.
No, Colorado won.
Colorado won.
So Florida's gone.
Florida is gone. Yeah. Exactly like I said. Colorado won. Florida is gone. And the 7 seed Florida was this story.
There's a Kentucky Derby horse
buried in Prairie Village.
in like a cemetery
It's,
with humans.
Prairie Village was a farm in the 30s,
Yeah.
right? And so there is a cul-de-sac where you can see a display for Larwin, and this horse won in 1938. So there's houses around this thing, but you go down this cul-de-sac, and you can see this thing. So in 1938, my grandfather, who at the time was barely 21 years old or 20, something like that, in the Independence Examiner, I have a photocopy of a story written. He and a friend of his rode their bicycles from Independence, Missouri, to the Kentucky Derby, and watched the race.
This was who again?
My granddad.
Oh, he's buried by BRGR. Okay.
Over by the BR. Not my granddad. He's buried at 74th and Antioch. But
in that
Larwin,
cemetery with the swan by Dos Reales?
That's right.
Hey!
And my grandparents are up in there. So
I've never heard a person so excited about a cemetery.
He knows
before.
it's a little.
You drive by
it's so
somewhere your
little.
whole life. I went ghost hunting there one time.
Well, go see if my granddad and grandma are in there.
The fact that Marco was so excited about, hey, over by the Swan by Dos Reales, all right, cemetery.
They rode their bicycles from Kansas City to Louisville.
To watch Larwin, and Larwin ended up winning, and now his granddad is buried somewhere else, besides where Larwin is buried, much to the excitement of one Marco. The 2-15 matchup, 2 Marquette knocked off 15 Western Kentucky. WKU was out, so is this sound.
Dude, this is well, I'm going to try to get on Jake's level. It's a dangerous place to be for a second, but
Come on up here.
WKU out, Marquette advances. We move on to the round of 32 in the Wrong Mother Bleeper region. Houston, the Cougars, knocked off Texas A&M. The 9 seed is out. I think Joey Votto has a big knob. Ellie De La Cruz's knob is bigger, but it's also different shaped than what you would expect a knob to be.
You said he was carrying a hammer.
He's got an odd-shaped butt. He's got an awkward-looking knob.
I've never marked so many cuts in more than 10 seconds before.
The bat.
Was that on purpose?
That's, the bat. Maybe half purpose. We were talking about Ellie De La Cruz and the attempted, I think the Yankees saying that Ellie De La Cruz had an illegal bat
knob.
But because of the knob that was oddly shaped, although it was approved by Major League Baseball beforehand. And Joey Votto has a different knob than Ellie.
I'd expect that.
Typically, that would be how it goes. That's the 1 versus 9. Houston moved on. We had the number 12 seed take on the number 4 seed, Duke, against James Madison. Duke won. James Madison is out, so is this sound. A lot of different ways to describe Patrick Mahomes. I just describe him as the best. Best football player in the world. I am not going to say the universe because I don't know if there's an awesome football player on Uranus. Do you know for a fact there's not?
For a fact, yeah. There's no life
okay.
on
Well,
Uranus.
I mean-
I think they know that. But other galaxies.
It's my fault, Dylan. It's my fault for talking over that. Damn it.
So
there's no life on your.
So
is that a fact?
It's a fact. I can tell.
Poor James Madison.
So the James Madison Dukes beat a team from Madison and then lost to Duke.
Whoa, I never thought about that.
Mm-hmm. Beat Wisconsin, team from Madison.
Yeah.
Lost to Duke.
Huh.
We had three Dukes in the round of 32. Duquesne?
Mm-hmm.
Dukes?
Duke and the Dukes.
James Madison?
Duke is Duke.
Singular Duke.
They're on TV more than Leave It to Beaver reruns. The NC State versus Oakland matchup. Oakland ended up going home, knocked off. That means Oakland and the number 14 sound piece of sound is out.
I'm turning me off. Nah.
Todd wasn't happy about that sound being included, but that's what happens. It may have been recorded off the air, but still, it made it. We played it on the air, so it counted. It played a regular season game. It made it on the air.
Kind of turned me off too.
That's right. The 2 versus was it 10? Was Colorado the team that won?
Yep.
Figured that out eventually. Marquette and Colorado, and Colorado has been eliminated, and that means this sound is out.
Intentional grounding. Offense number 7. It's a 10-yard penalty. I'm talking to America here. It's a 10-yard penalty and a loss of down. Second down.
That is the best line I've ever heard out of an official. We'll get to the penalty in a minute. He just told Geno Smith, I'm talking to America. Pete Carroll is livid.
Was that
Colorado.
Carl? Was that Carl too?
I don't know if that was. It didn't sound like this.
He's had a couple of them like that. Not as good as that, but it's not Carl. It's another guy who's he's got some moxie out there.
Mm-hmm. So we have Houston that'll be taking on Duke, and we have NC State that'll be taking on Marquette. So there you go. As we released those that sound last week in the bracket of sound. That was on Tuesday because you were not here with us, but we have eliminated some of those other pieces of sound as well. So 4 teams remaining in the South, typically how it works.
That works.
With the
4,
NCAA
4,
tournament.
4, and 4.
Yep, that's right. That's exactly right. Let's get to Learn Funniest Best here. Me, you, Dylan, what we learned from the weekend, funniest from the weekend, and the best from the weekend. What I learned from the weekend is that Jerry Jones doesn't actually use his notepad. Did I steal one from you? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Dylan.
that's okay.
Was that your learned or funniest?
That was.
It could have been either
It
one.
could be any of them. I think it was my best.
It was your best? Okay.
Yes.
Well, Jerry Jones did not actually use a notepad. They took a picture of Jerry Jones. It was for a story, and they zoomed in on Jerry Jones's notepad. And as it turns out, he doesn't
I saw
actually-
the picture. I haven't zoomed in, though.
Yeah, so here's the picture of Jerry Jones, and there's his notepad. Just a bunch of scribbles all over.
Is that a football play?
No, it's just scribbling everywhere. Just scribbling all over the picture or on the notepad. That's all he has. It's just scribbles everywhere. It's like, hey,
Maybe that was his language. Back
Hey,
when he was
I need
born.
you to hold. Can you hold this notepad and because we're gonna take a picture like you're doing something. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just what do you want? I don't know. Just put some writing.
I
on it.
guarantee
Scribble,
he ain't
scribble,
taking
scribble.
his notes in his phone. If he does take notes, it's definitely pen to paper.
Yes, for sure. What'd you learn?
I learned. So I was in Illinois this weekend, and I was looking to place my bets on all 8 games on Saturday, right? And so I placed bets on 7 games. I'm like, I'm missing a game. What is it?
Yeah, you are.
And so I look, and I'm like, the game I'm missing is Duquesne, Illinois. So I search Illinois. It doesn't show up in my app. I search Duquesne. That doesn't show up in my app. I learned that on the apps, at the very least, you can at other places like at casinos and stuff. You can on the apps you cannot bet on Illinois teams in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to race home before that game, and I had to get through Missouri to get to Kansas to make that bet. So I imagine that's really good for Illinois athletes, right? You have to worry about that as much. But I'd imagine a lot of Illinois residents are like, this is a pain in the butt. This is who I cheer for. This is who I bet on. So yeah, I learned that. You knew that already?
I read it somewhere, so as soon as you started to say that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I read it at one point, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you off the bat. Like, what state will not let you bet on college teams in that state? By the way, speaking of betting, Shohei Ohtani will not be taking questions today. He will just simply read a statement at 4:45 Central Time today. So
it's not the sport you want to be caught betting in.
Yeah, he is not. He's not going to. Hey, why did the story change so quickly? Why did it go that you were being a friend and helping him out to then, he knew nothing about anything?
Yeah.
Why did it change that quickly? It was like 25 minutes the story came out. It was like, oh, no, he was just helping me. Oh, he knew nothing about that. Oh, okay.
Right.
Are you sure with the $4 million that were bet on a game where Shohei Ohtani gave up 8 runs? Are you sure he didn't have anything to do with it? Okay, you probably just knew he was bad. Anyway, what'd you learn, Dylan?
I learned that the F1 winner of, I think it was this weekend, his name, Carlos Sainz, has won his first race since removing his appendix. So it actually makes you a little lighter, I think.
Makes you lighter.
It's, you have a little more aerodynamic ability.
You know what? Every single ounce counts.
His quote actually was, I would recommend all of the drivers take out their appendix. So
yeah. Well, it's good luck, clearly.
He was like the first non-Max Verstappen win in like the last 20 races or something too. So pretty cool.
All right, the funniest for you, Mick.
Funniest for me, the Trailblazers and the Clippers played a game last week, and the Clippers were winning by 20 in the third quarter when James Harden drove the paint and kicked out to his own teammate. Harden then reversed course and ran out and contested his own teammate's shot. And it is the funniest thing I've ever seen. I'm watching it on loop. It is so hilarious. The teammate missed the shot. The Trailblazer guy is doing the same, but he's behind Harden. Harden's the first hand to get there. He's got to shoot over 2 hands, and one of them is his own teammate.
He misses it.
He misses it.
He missed the 3.
Oh, my God, that was funny.
He's played on so many teams, he has no idea.
He has no idea.
Yeah.
He missed the 3, and then he just stared at Harden like, what the heck are you doing? Weirdo. Come on, man. What was the funniest for you, Dylan?
The funniest for me, if anyone caught this, Brendan Haywood had a pretty good weekend on the mic. He described someone getting crossed over in maybe the best way I've ever heard.
Oh, wow. Anytime you make a move and your defender is no longer in the picture when you're shooting, that's a great move.
Great move, but the shot wasn't so hot.
Man, he crossed him onto another channel. Caleb Love might be on True TV right now.
That is really good.
Hayward's pretty good.
He was good. He was very good.
I like what I'm hearing from him. My funniest comes from Lexington. The Lexington Herald put out a story on John Calipari and what the future is, and he's going to meet with Mitch Barnhart, their AD, K-State guy, going to meet with the AD today or tomorrow, and the headline reads, John Calipari, Kalipari. John Calipari with a K.
Wow.
In Lexington.
Okay.
Yeah, funniest. He can't even spell it. He's the most famous person in the city. What was the best? We start with you, Dylan.
That my best was your Jerry Jones chicken scratch, where you come to Jerry Jones and have one amazing question you've been working on all week, and he's writing scribbles on his piece of paper as you're asking it. So.
That's right. My best is Ian Eagle. Over the weekend,
He's always the best.
Yeah, I know. So people are a little worried about no Jim Nance. This is a little matchup of just a couple of the Ian Eagle isms over the weekend and how much fun he is.
Young in there for Duke. Deep one. He checks. Oh, yeah! Another! Jared McCain is not human.
Dan Hurley is the king of superstitions, especially on game day. He has to have 8 M&Ms before every game. He has to have a cup of bulletproof coffee on the sidelines at all times, and do not knock it over. And he has to wear the same suit and socks and shoes, and yes, the same Red Dragon underwear. And don't worry, it is clean. His wife, Andrea, travels with a portable washing machine. I mean, you can't make that up on him.
And apparently they travel a Maytag repairman with them as part of the crew. No, they do not. Who has a portable washing machine? I didn't even know that existed.
A nice little photo by Martinelli. There's a man whose wife loves him. I thought Bobby Hurley was high maintenance. He's the only coach I don't like to interview before the game.
Yeah, this
for
is
obvious reasons.
This is the living version of Silver Linings playbook for the UConn Huskies. Bowie, lots of moves. Bowie denied. Klingon denied. 2 for the price of 1.
A monster performance early.
Castle on a kick. Newton, skip. Spencer one-on-one with Martinelli, 12 to shoot.
And no bad shots, but interesting.
There's Newton, kick. Castle, short. Oh, a Brooklyn wedgie.
Brooklyn wedgie from Iron Eagle. All right, what was your best, man?
Best was the Yale's band couldn't make it to Spokane, Washington, so University of Idaho's band not only went there, not only learned the fight song, but they wore Yale T-shirts the whole time.
It's just a button up with a sweater. That's all they wore.
Yeah.
We'll take a time out. What's up next?
It was one of my best performances of the week.
I agree. It was one of the best hours that you've done this week on 810.
Of all the hours I've done,
that's exactly right. Yeah, no, it was really good. It was almost Sunday sound off worthy. That was a good group last night.
It was a great group last night.
Loved
We had
it.
you, we had Swanee, and we had Les Norman.
Two of the
Talked about
third.
baseball.
Two of the three were awesome.
Two of my favorite people.
That's absolutely, man. Two of my favorite people too. I love Les.
Yeah,
I love Mike.
Makes sense.
You were there too. Rob, you were there. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Soren Petro, the program comes your way after we are done, and right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB tonight, KU taking on USC. Should be a fun one tonight. See if the Hawks can knock off the Trojans.